IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It is Friday, and that means it is Friday free-for-all Notre Dame mailbag time here at Irish Breakdown. That's Trevor Trowbridge. I'm Brian Driscoll, and we are ready to rock and roll. The great part about today, Trevor, is we don't have to determine what we talk about. The fans do. The people in the chat do. So if you want to ask a question or make a comment, you can just put an MB on there or a mailbag emoji, or you can send in a super chat. And if we see super chats, we'll bring them up as soon as we see them. They'll be the next questions after we see them. And we're ready to rock and roll. You can talk about anything college football related, anything Notre Dame football related, anything Notre Dame sports related, anything recruiting related. And we allow the occasional non-football question to come up as well. If it's a good enough one, we'll bring that up, obviously, as well. So, Trevor, my man, good to see you today. I'm ready to rock and roll. Did you get like a fresh cut today or something? Is that why you're going without the hat, or are you just trying to style today? What's going on, man?
I've been wearing a hat the last couple days, so scalp's getting a little itchy.
Okay,
so we're
okay.
we're switching it up today.
You have like a nice young man. I'm trying to look sweet. I just got married haircut. I don't give a rip anymore. And so I'm just kidding. I've had this haircut since I was 16 years old. But I'm ready to rock and roll, man. Trevor, you ready to go? You ready to enjoy some football tomorrow, man? We always enjoy football on the weekends, but it is nice to occasionally just be able to sit back and watch other games without the stress or pressure of what am I going to have to deal with from Notre Dame fans today about however this went down? As a fan, ups and downs of Notre Dame playing, and then just like, I got to think about what the post-game show. Let's get to sit back and chill and be a college football fan for a day. It happens once or twice a year. It's glorious, and I'm very much looking forward to it. And there's a lot of sneaky good games on this weekend too, Trevor. There's not like the big 5-7 matchup, but there's a lot of really, really interesting games on TV tonight and tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm excited, man. I love Fridays. Obviously, it's one of my favorite days of the week. Like you said, we can sit back and enjoy some football and not have to stress too much over the outcome of a specific game. The in-laws actually invited Lauren and I to Cincinnati this Sunday because the Bengals play the Ravens at home and they have season tickets. So we're all going to go together on Sunday, which I'm excited for. So ready for just a good weekend of semi-relaxing and spending some time with some family, man. It's gonna be awesome.
Love it. Well, obviously, safe travels going there, Trevor. But hey, I am ready to rock and roll. We're gonna dive right into the Q&A, and there is a super chat that we have, but there's something else I wanted to start off with first because I like victories in football and victories in life. And we got a question or a comment from someone whose name I have not seen in the chat before. And he says, because it's his first time, it's from Jacob Sweat. He says, good afternoon, men. Long-time listener, first-time chat. Want to say thank you to Brian and the team. I just got out of rehab for my alcohol addiction, and first thing that pops in my head is mailbag. That is a victory, my man. You know what I mean? Step one is saying, hey, I need to get help. Step two is getting the help, and we're going to celebrate that victory, and we're glad that you are here celebrating that victory with us. And we will be praying for you, Jacob. And we will look, anytime you feel that struggle, man, just know Irish Breakdown's here. Go to the channel. We'll be whatever you need us to be to help continue to get you through this. And I know all of our families are affected by that to some degree. And we're super proud of you, Jacob, and happy for you. And we'll be praying for you. And we're going to put as good of a show on today as we can, my man. But just know, Jacob, if today's show isn't as good, it's not our fault. It's the questions aren't good enough. I'm totally kidding. The questions are always good from this group of people. But, man, we're happy for you. Yeah. We're proud of you. And we're going to rock and roll and get this mailbag going and hope that it's a great time. But I thought of no better way to start this mailbag than with Jacob's victory, man. So definitely happy for you. Definitely happy for you.
Yeah, Brian, glad you did that. It's such a strong battle to overcome that I don't think enough people talk about. So, Jacob, congratulations, man. Wish you nothing but the best. To Brian's point, if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out to Irish Breakdown and IB Nation. We got your back, man. Congratulations.
Now let's get into some football talk, Trevor. And we got a super chat here from Rob Osgood. So, Rob, thank you, man, for kicking things off with a nice super chat there. So let's start talking some ball, man. Let's get to it.
Let's do it. Rob asks, recruiting question. In light of recent events, how would you as the coach conduct recruiting efforts to keep recruits honest? I think Chad Bowden is doing an outstanding job, and it's showing on the field. Thank you.
I mean, there's nothing you can do to keep other people honest. I mean, there's nothing I can do to make Trevor be honest, and there's nothing Trevor that can make me be honest. There's consequences if someone is not honest in a conversation or in a relationship, but there's nothing you can do to do that. What you have to do is essentially is have safeguards in place in order to kind of call it out. Like Notre Dame has backed off their whole you can't visit thing if you're committed. I think that's a mistake. I do. Because that's a great way to know just how serious a kid is about your program. And if a kid's willing to take visits knowing his spot might be given up, then you know what? He's not coming to your school. And if a kid is just wanting, just is serious about it, then he'll be willing to make that sacrifice. So I actually think that's a mistake. I thought one of the things that they did really well was having that no visit policy. And, at that point in time, I don't really know what you can do to make people be honest. I think you just have to evaluate actions. And in Notre Dame's case, I think they did a good job of evaluating Deuce Knight's actions, in my opinion. And that is when she started taking visits, they started looking around. And yes, they battled and they fought and they tried to keep him in the class, but they knew. And so for example, we have a story up today about coaching visits that are taking place. And I know that Chad Bowden and Gino Gaduli are out seeing quarterbacks today. These aren't names that they just jumped on Tuesday or Wednesday when Deuce decommitted. These are names that they've been working on for a while. And I talked to somebody yesterday that was like, once he made his decision to visit Auburn the second time, like they were like, all right, we're Coach Freeman and Chad are still battling for him and all that, but the offensive staff had to start moving on and finding other quarterbacks. And so that's all you can do. I mean, it's no matter what you're doing in life, you can't control if your boss lies to you. You can't control if an employee lies to you. You can't control if a spouse lies to you, a friend lies to you, what a recruit lies to you, a coach lies to you. You can control how you conduct yourself, and same thing is true for young men. You can't control that a coach lies to you. You can only conduct yourself in a way that's appropriate and say, hey, look, I'm not going to allow their actions to cause me to act in a way that I know doesn't reflect well on me. And because now you're making it about, okay, you're both wrong type of thing. So in this case, there's nothing Notre Dame could have done. And I know fans are like, you should have dropped him. And I'm like, okay, no, you shouldn't have, because there's no need to do that. You keep recruiting him. And if he flips somewhere else, he flips, and then you move on. That's life. You're trying to flip people from other schools. So, I mean, that's part of recruiting. So, and you just have to have a plan. You have to have a plan in place. And there comes a point in time where you would have to step away. Like if Deuce was like, no, I'm going to stay committed and I'm going to take some visits in the fall, and then I'll make my December decision in December. Like, nope, that ain't happening. We're moving on. And that's why you don't get caught in a Peyton Bowen situation. But with like Deuce and Keon and those type of guys, it's like, you as soon as they make those decisions, then you got to make your own decisions. And there's really nothing that you can do to outside of, using force, which is not an option, to get other people to conduct themselves in a way that you deem appropriate or works best for you. You just have to react to how other people act. And then you've got to react in a way to make sure that you're not bringing yourself down to their level, that you're above reproach. And that's true for football coaches. That's true for players. And that's just true in life, in my opinion.
Agreed. There's some level of trust and faith you have to instill in the other person. Brian, to your point, the players have to trust the coaches and vice versa. Coaches have to be able to trust the players. So yeah, there are safeguards that you can put in place, but it's an imperfect system. It's the same thing with, when you're looking to hire somebody at a company. There are times where you make a really good hire, and then there's times where hires don't really pan out, or candidates are interviewing for multiple jobs. So I don't want to make it sound like a job interview per se, but
it is though. It is though. I mean, in all reality, you're trying to convince, as an institution, you're trying to convince a young person to come into your corporation. And at the end of the day, these football teams are as much businesses, sadly, as they are sports programs. And you're trying to put your best foot forward, and they're trying to win you over. Because, like, look, Trevor, I mean, sometimes you take a job. I'm just randomly using this as an example. You take a job under certain circumstances, and you tell them certain things about your life going into the job, and then when you do what you told them you're going to do, when you get hired, they act a way where they're not happy about it. That's on them, right? That's on them. And if they turn out to be not trustworthy, then you still got to do what's best for you and hopefully another better job comes along. I'm just, random hypothetical examples there, but you can only control your own actions. And if somebody does something you don't like, okay, well, what are my steps going to be and what am I actually going to be? So there's just guys, this is part of college football recruiting, and it's especially true for quarterback recruiting.
Yeah.
Look, here's the reality of it. If you sign a stud quarterback every year, the odds of every 4 years of you keeping 2 of those 4 on your rosters for 4 years is not great.
Yeah.
That's just the world we live in. And there aren't a lot of Mac Joneses willing to sit 3 years so they get their 1 year to start. That's just not happening anymore, sadly, or rarely anymore. So, that's where we are. So you just have to plan accordingly, and we can complain about it, and I will, because I think it's shady, and I'm not someone who just accepts the way things are and just embrace it. There's acceptance of, this is the reality, and then there is acceptance in regard to I'm embracing it, and I'm accepting that it's a reality, but doesn't mean I have to like it or condone it or say that it's okay. But that's the world we live in now, and people have to understand that. So it's just the way that recruiting is overall. And just you accept it and move on. So I do, like you said, I think the staff's doing a good job with that. They didn't get caught with their pants down on this one, like they did Peyton Bowen. They've learned their lessons and they've had a plan moving forward. And we'll see who they go get.
Peter Fribbert asks, which player on Notre Dame is going to have the biggest breakthrough performance-wise?
Well, Peter, I have no idea. I can't tell you who. I'm not a prognosticator, but here's what I'll do for you, Peter. I will give you some guys that I hope break through because I think they're on the verge of breaking through, right, based on what we've seen. We talked a little bit about it yesterday, Trevor, but I think this young linebacking core as a whole is on the verge of really breaking through. And as a group, not just one guy, but like Drake Bowen's ascending, Kingston's ascending, Jaden Osbury's ascending. I think that trio is on the verge of really breaking out and having a big performance. I have a feeling, Trevor, over the next month, we're going to have a Bryce Young breakthrough performance. I really do. I think we're going to see that. And I have a feeling over the next 3 games that there's going to be some sort of receiver breakthrough performance where somebody's going to have a big game and it just sparks them on a run down the stretch. That's my prediction. Will that happen or not? Which receiver will that be? Will it be Jaden Greathouse? I don't know. Will it be Chris Mitchell? Will it be Bo Collins, KK Smith, Jordan Faison, Jaden Thomas? I have no clue. Somebody else? I have no clue. I just see that happening. That's something that I would predict on top of the others. Because, you can't say, Christian Gray's already had his. I think Don Schuler's already had his, right? I don't, maybe hopefully an offensive lineman does maybe. So, but those are the guys that I look at, Trevor.
I agree. Not much more to add there. I was going to cover the linebackers, and you got it. So I'm with you.
There you go.
Aiden Benami, has the lack of defensive line play a referendum of Al Washington? We've said he's been lacking in recruiting, but has coached well. Thoughts 5 games in?
Well, I feel like if Al Washington's team unit isn't perfect, that the mob just kind of goes in on him. He's just one of those guys that any topic about Al Washington, it's kind of like, you ever boil some water and you turn it off and it immediately stops boiling. You turn that thing back on and it immediately starts boiling again. He's always at that temperature where he's not boiling, but then something happens and then, let's turn it up and it's boiling again. Look, there are some players for Notre Dame's defensive line who have not played up to expectations. There's no question. Riley Mills and Howard Cross have not played up to expectations. But Josh Burnham was having a heck of a year early. It's early. He got hurt. Jordan Patojo was having, without a doubt, the best season of his career and then got hurt. Boubacar Traore was balling out. He was a very raw player that had been developed to the point where he was a difference maker. Then he gets hurt. Donovan Heinisch, I thought, had a really rough first couple games. He's gotten better and better and better each week to the point where I thought this past week he might have had the best game of his career. Jason Onye's having the best year of his career so far. So which ones do you want to hang your hat on? That a fifth and a sixth-year senior that know better aren't playing up to their expectations. A 6-year transfer is not as good as you'd hoped he would be, but everybody else is having sort of the best season of their career. So which one do you want to blame on Al Washington? Do you want to say he gets no credit for all the guys that are having career years, and we're only going to blame him for the veterans who aren't doing what he shouldn't have to tell them they need to do? I mean, look, I'm no Al Washington apologist, but I just named a lot of things that I don't think are overly disputable in regard to guys having the best seasons of their career. So are we going to say that's just what happened anyway and he gets no credit for that? But man, look at Riley and Howard Cross. Well, okay. I mean, you look at it however you want. I think he's doing a solid job of coaching this year. I don't think he's doing a great job of coaching. I think there's still some things I want to see from this D line, but I think he's doing a good job, not a great job. Now, what's going to define how good of a job he does moving forward on the whole is, can he then push the right buttons to get Riley and Howard and RJ Oben going? And if if this is a good D line in the final 7 games without Jordan Patojo, without Boubacar Traore, with Gabriel Rubio missing at least half the year, I'd say, hey, the guy did a pretty good job. Is he doing a great job? No, I don't think he's doing a great job, because a great job would be even more impactful getting to the ball, making more plays in the backfield, making more plays in the quarterback. I think he's doing a good job. I think part of the issue that they're having right now, and this is true at tight end, is the tight ends coach doing a bad job, or does Mitchell Evans have just a bad attitude? Now your job as a coach is to get that corrected, but at some point in time, it's like, look, I need you to do what you're supposed to do as a player. And Al Washington needs to figure out the buttons to push to get that. But I think he's done a good job. There's some things he's done really well and some things he hasn't done as well. And so on the whole, you add them together, it's doing a good job. I would like to see him doing a great job in the final 7 games.
We touched on this a little bit last night during Rapid Fire, and we were going through and we were ranking all the coaches if they were underrated, overrated, or properly rated. And Al Washington was definitely a hot topic of discussion last night. But I think you hit the nail on the head, Brian. I don't think you can overlook what Boubacar Traore has done, or Junior Tuihalamaka playing better than he has his entire career, and Josh Burnham coming onto the scene, and him getting Logan Thomas and Bryce Young ready. I don't know if that can be overshadowed by Riley Mills and Howard Cross having something going on with their season so far. So I'm with you. I don't think it's an outstanding, fantastic coaching job, but I don't think it's bad by any means. Mohammed Abdi, Part 1. Brian, what do you make of the proposal of the 14-team playoff expansion that's floated around, that Notre Dame would be guaranteed one of the 3 at-large spots if it finished in the top 14? In Part 2 of the college football rankings, with the exception of 2019 season, 10-2 will be enough to make the field every year. It seems favorable compared to the 12-team format.
Well, I mean, the last part, Trevor, guys, every year is different. Mm-hmm. There's going to be years you're 10-2 and you're ranked 16th, and there's years you're going to be, because there's a lot of highly ranked teams ahead of you. There's a lot of 1-2 loss teams, and you didn't maybe play a very tough schedule, or maybe your 2 losses were really bad losses. And then there's going to be years you're, 10-2 and you're ranked 7th. I mean, that's just the way football goes. I'm not a big fan of guaranteed spots, to be completely honest with you. I understand conference championships. I can live with that one. Outside of that, like I can't sit here and say I think it's BS. It's pure greed. It's ruining the game. It's a lack of competitiveness that these clowns in the SEC and the Big Ten are fighting for guaranteed spots beyond their champion. And then say, but I think if Notre Dame just reach some arbitrary top 14 ranking, they should be in. I mean, the whole reality is there should be a thing where, in my opinion, where the rules are going to be, you take the top 4 or 5 conference champions, highest ranked champions, as long as they're like in the top 14. So like the only guarantees that I would give is not that if you win your conference championship, you get in. It's if you win your conference championship and you're ranked in the top 14, the 4 highest of those teams gets a bye. That's all I really would defend. You still got, like, if you win your – remember the year that UConn won the Big East and had like 4 losses? And so they played in like the Orange Bowl or something like that. Like, I don't want to see that nonsense. Like, look, yeah, your league gets an automatic bid as long as your league champion's at least ranked at certain spot. Outside of that, if you're not a top 15 team, I don't care what league you won. Your league must not have been very good. I think the only guarantee should be top 4 to 5 conference champions that are ranked in the top. If you're a group of 5 team and you're not ranked in the top 14, I don't think you should get in. Now, my counter to that would be, I would also then say, but I'm more sympathetic to that than the argument for Notre Dame or a Power 5, because I think at times those group of 5 teams are not given appropriate rankings for how good they may or may not be. So there's been years where I'm like, that team was really good and should have been ranked higher, but they weren't because they have the stigma of being a group of 5. So I understand it's not an easy cut and dry conversation, but look, I always try to be consistent. I don't like hypocrites, and I can't sit here and say for years that I don't like automatic bids, and then all of a sudden there's one that works out for Notre Dame, and I'm like, cool, get them in, because if Notre Dame's ranked 14th, I don't really care about them getting in because they're probably not a championship caliber football team, and I think you'd be better served going and playing in a bowl game that you can win, ending your season on a win. Because here's the thing, if you're not a championship caliber team, or at least a team capable of winning at least 2 games, I'd rather you go play in a bowl game and end your season on a win. Because if you get into the playoff, only one team can end their season with a win. That's it. Everybody else is going to end their season with a loss. That's the one negative about being in the NCAA tournament, is all but one of those 68 teams is guaranteed to end their season with a loss. And so if you're 13th or 14th, I don't know how hard I would say, oh, man, should have got in. Okay, man, they would have done damage. No, they wouldn't have. Because like you look at like USC in 16, they started the season off 1-3. They dominated down the stretch and they ended up ranked 9th. They would have been in anyway. Wouldn't have needed any sort of automatic thing. So if I'm going to be consistent, and one thing I strive to be is honest, and the other thing I strive to be is consistent. And unless I've changed my mind, and I haven't here, then I can't support a format where Notre Dame gets an automatic bid. I just say rank Notre Dame fairly. That's all I ask. Rank them fairly without bias. And if you rank all these teams fairly without bias, then I'll accept whatever outcome you have. Be consistent in your rankings. Have a criteria and stick to it. Doesn't matter if your favorite conference gets in or not. That's all I would truly care about at the end of the day, Trevor. And if Notre Dame is good enough to be in that, they will be in that. So I don't need them to have guarantees. That's my stance. And I know that's unrealistic. And, in this anti-competitive world where it's not about how good you are, but, how much money you can make or how, powerful your conference is, that's not really reality anymore. But as I said earlier, just because I can accept that something is the way that it is, doesn't mean I have to like it or condone it or say that if it was up to me, I'm okay with it, because I'm not.
I'm with you. I don't have much more to add than that. So the only thing that I will say is I think it's a little bit too early to start talking about a 14-team playoff before we've seen a 12-team playoff format. But I understand where you're coming from, Muhammad. It's an interesting concept, but anything with a guarantee for Notre Dame, I'm in the same boat as Brian. So I'm with you. Tom Connor with a super chat.
Yeah,
sorry.
Thank you for that. No, it's okay, man. I didn't know if you knew how to handle just the super stickers without questions. So I should have known you knew how to deal with it. But Tom, I appreciate the super sticker, man. Really do.
Kirill later. I think I pronounced that right. Carrie later.
Yeah. I don't remember. This person explained it. I went with Carrie later. I'm not sure if that's correct or not.
Well, let's hope so. Carrie later, correct me if I'm wrong in the chat. Hey, IB Nation, how about that Mitch Jeter, huh? Pure money kicks all season, which makes me wonder, who is the best portal addition so far and potentially moving forward?
I think the best portal addition so far, and correct me if I'm forgetting someone, has been Jordan Clark.
Yep.
I mean, and look, Mitch Jeter's been everything you'd hoped he would be, right? I mean, the only 2 misses he's had, I think, were both blocked because they were super long kicks. Mm-hmm. He's nailed everything else, and he's nailed them in clutch moments, and you think about the the late game, that put the A&M game away. But a position player that plays as much as Jordan Clark does is always going to have more of an impact over a kicker, even if a kicker's making a bunch of game-winning plays, because you're like, yeah, but it's the position players that kind of put you in position to be able to make that game-winning kick. So I would say him. And then third, I'd probably go Bo Collins next behind Mitch Jeter and Jordan Clark. I don't know that Bo's being that low is as much about Bo as just how the offense has gone so far. You could argue that Riley Leonard should be ahead of Bo Collins because as much as Riley struggled as a thrower, he's been really dynamic as a rusher. He does lead the team in rushing. So I think, Jordan Clark probably would be my number one. And then it's a battle between, Mitch Jeter, Bo Collins, and Riley Leonard would kind of be next in line for me as far as who that's been. And I'm hoping that we're having a different conversation at the end of the year and Rod Hurd and RJ Oben start making more of an impact in this conversation. And look, another transfer that's starting to make an impact that we're not talking about is Max Hurleman, the kid that transferred in from, I believe, Colgate as a walk-on. I mean, he's their punt returner now. He had a huge tackle on a kick return. And if he doesn't make that tackle around the 17, that guy's picking up at least 10 to 15 more yards on that kick return. So he's having a pretty good impact so far as well.
I'm with you. Not much different. Mine was Jordan Clark as well.
Yep. All right.
Event ND. Do you expect Notre Dame to continue to take so many early commitments moving forward? Seems like this inevitably leads to a few decommitments and drops.
Well, I mean, look, the reality is, guys, decommitments are going to happen. So if you have a strategy that you believe in and you think that works best for you, because you don't change your strategy because of what a couple guys did, because you haven't lost a lot of your top guys. You haven't lost. Notre Dame, it will always be a program that needs to get guys in early and then fight to keep them. That's just the reality. It's easier to keep a kid in the class than it is to land him when he's open or to flip him if he's a top player. It's very hard for it's going to be very hard for Notre Dame and a lot of schools to flip kids, because there aren't a ton of, like, the top kids flip a lot, and then that sends sort of a kind of a chain of events into place that creates a lot of the other chaos. But there's nothing you can do to not have decommitments and drops. Now, some of the kids that they've taken early, I didn't support them taking them early. It's like, I'll just be honest with you. The Daniel Anderson situation is one. At the time, I said, look, I see some nice things from the young man, but I don't know that I would take him this early. And now that Notre Dame has made the decision that they've made to kind of move on from Daniel Anderson, I'm even more upset about it, because it's like, look, this kid, you took this kid when he was injured. He had a great camp. He ran a 4.55, something like that at Notre Dame's camp, earned an interest from Notre Dame. But then he went out his junior year and he was not healthy. And now he's not healthy now. And so the football part has not worked out for Daniel Anderson. And from just a pure football standpoint, I completely understand the decision that Notre Dame has made. My understanding is Notre Dame was honest with Daniel from the beginning about, in order to keep this spot, you need to do this, this, and this. And he wasn't able to do that because of injuries on the field. But off the field, Daniel Anderson is everything you want in a recruit. He's pro Notre Dame. I mean, he's been a huge Notre Dame supporter, never wavered, never visited, did everything right. And my comment at the time was there was no need to take him that early, because if he does what he needs to do on the field, he's the kind of kid you can flip from somebody else down the road or land later. There was no need to rush that decision. Same thing with a guy like CJ May. Like you take a kid and get buyer's remorse and then you drop the kid. That Notre Dame shouldn't be doing stuff like that. If you take a kid, it's because you plan to keep him in the class, unless he doesn't live up to his end of the bargain based on what he does in the classroom, what he does as a young man off the field, and that he's a kid that's not going out there and pursuing other schools and visiting other schools. Like you say, look, we'll accept your commitment if you do A, B, C, and D. And then if he doesn't live up to A, B, C, and D, then you move on from it. And one of those things should not necessarily be like, hey, you're not as good as we hoped you would be. You shouldn't have taken him that early if he was that way. That's my whole thing. And there was definitely some kids that they took too early. So what I would say to you, Bent, it's not so much that Notre Dame took so many early commitments, I'm totally fine with that. If they're loaded up and they're done by June and it's a class full of Dallas Goldens and Jadon players, and I'm cool, man. You know what I mean? But it's like there's a lot of kids they kind of took that I felt maybe we like this kid, but we'll keep our eyes open, that I don't think they should have taken. Sean Terry's an example. Now, Sean Terry gave you the out because he visited another school and then was not honest about visiting another school. At that point in time, it's like, I'm okay. CJ May went and visited another school. Okay, they gave you the out. Daniel Anderson didn't do that. And again, I understand why Notre Dame did what they did. As a football coach, I understand it. I'm not mad about it. I just don't like it because it's like you offered that kid. He didn't force you to offer him. He didn't force you to take his commitment. And because he hasn't turned out to be the player he is, but he did everything else right, part of me says like you should honor that part of it. But at the same time, as a coach, this is where the tough part is as a coach, Trevor. As a coach, it's like, okay, but I don't think this kid can play for us. So do I bring him in here and say, hey, listen, you're going to come play for us. We love you. We're going to honor that. Or do you have an honest conversation? Hey, listen, buddy, I love you and you've done everything right, but this isn't the level for you. If you want to play college football, you need to maybe look over here. Now, that's a different story. Now, what I would have done the only thing I would have done different in the Daniel Anderson situation is I'd have sat down and had a conversation with Daniel and said, hey, listen, and Notre Dame did this with Greg Crippen a few years ago. They said, look, man, we took you. You haven't panned out like we hoped, but they let him go find another school first and then, quote unquote, flip. The problem with that is if you do it that way, then that kid starts catching heat from the fans. And honestly, that's why I sent out the tweet last night that I did, Trevor, was, look, this is not the same thing as Deuce Knight, folks. Daniel Anderson is not the same thing as Deuce Knight. If Daniel Anderson had his way, he'd still be a Notre Dame commit right now and be a cheerleader for this program. But like I said, I can understand it. And I could even say I might have done the same thing. The end result that I would have been the same if I was in your shoes, but still say I don't like the process and that. But if it was up to me, I wouldn't have taken his commitment that early to begin with, especially since he was injured. I say, let's see how you get healthy and see how you play and all that kind of stuff. So it's an unfortunate situation. So like I'd say, reevaluate what players you take early. And make sure that if you decide to take a guy early that you're not going to drop him unless, like, here's the other thing too, is you have to be willing to do that sometimes, Trevor. What if you take a kid and he doesn't work hard and he just starts coasting? Like, no, we took you because you were this kind of player and you haven't lived up to your end. You're not working hard. You put on a bunch of weight. You're not.
Right.
That's not what happened with Daniel Anderson. He just got hurt and he never came back and he's never been the same player since the injury. That's different than a kid who maybe, let's say a lineman that doesn't work hard and he gets chunky and he doesn't have the same film because he's not putting in the work. He's like, I'm at Notre Dame now, I'm coasting. That's a different animal. And that's so there always needs to be the exceptions to the rule of, hey, you didn't live up to your end of the bargain and you didn't keep working as a player. And so we're moving on.
Agreed. BK's last brain cell. In your evaluation, do you think Michigan quarterback Jay Davis should be given the opportunity to battle for the starting job this year? Obviously, Orgy is not the future.
I'll be honest, I've never been a huge Jaden Davis fan. I've never thought he was as good as his rankings indicated. And my concern, if I'm Michigan, is let's just say that I'm wrong on the town evaluation. What I'm not wrong on is he's a bit of a raw kid physically and from a developmental standpoint. You are not a championship caliber team this year, in my opinion, if you're Michigan. You're just not. Now, I know they're ranked in the top 10 and they've got the big win over USC and all that, but they're not. They have to have an honest conversations with themselves. And I'm not putting a young man out there that's physically and mentally ready to play, even if he is the future. You have to make sure that because you can sometimes do more damage to a kid in that situation. I don't put Jaden Davis in the same category as CJ Carr because I don't think he's as physically developed. I don't think he's as talented. I don't think he's as his football IQ is not the same as what Kenny Minchie and CJ Carr's was coming into Notre Dame. So in that instance, Trevor, I just can't support that decision because I also don't think it fits with the rest of their team. They don't have a lot of really good receivers either, in my opinion. They need to have the thing. The only way they can win is to say we're going to have to get Alex Orji a little better as a passer, but we're just going to go out there and play ground and pound football and limit possessions and keep scores down and let our great defense be our great defense, and we're just going to run the ball on you and hopefully hit a couple shots. I don't know that Jaden Davis makes their receiver talent better. I mean, it's outside of Colston and Loveland. I don't love a lot of what Michigan has at the skill positions on offense. And I don't know if throwing Jaden Davis into that mix is going to be the thing. The reality is Michigan, I mean, look, I think Dave Portnoy's let's just say this. I don't listen to him. And if he comes up on a feed, I change the channel and don't really care about his takes on anything, including pizza. Okay. So just don't care what he has to say. I'm simply relaying news. He has said that he'd pay up to $3 million to, get a quarterback there, which I just think that's so not the spirit of what NIL is supposed to be about. But, you didn't create any rules. So, what do you expect? Sure. Michigan needs to do that. They need to get a portal quarterback next year. Notre Dame, I don't think does, unless they have a bunch of transfers. Notre Dame does not need to be starting quarterback hunting in the portal. They're going to have to be depth hunting in the portal next year. Not, in my opinion, not starter hunting. Michigan needs to be starter hunting at quarterback and wide receiver, because I don't know that Jaden Davis is going to necessarily be ready next year either. I'm just not a huge Jaden Davis fan. So somebody else who might think, I don't know if you have a different opinion on Jaden Davis. Maybe you love the kid, Trevor. If you do, feel free to speak on that. But I just don't know if this, even if you liked him, I don't know that this team is built in a way where a kid like that is going to be able to thrive. Even if I'm wrong on the talent evaluation, I think the skill set, like the style of play evaluation, is such that I don't know that he fits really well on this particular team. Michigan's going to have to go quarterback hunting and receiver hunting in the portal in this offseason because their roster is not very good at either.
I see where you're coming from on this one, BK. Alex Orji is not a skilled passer, not right now. But Michigan's already gone through
that is so kind. That is the kindest thing you could have said about that. That is really well done, Trevor.
Thank you. I appreciate
grace today. Showing grace today.
It's a Friday. I'm in a really good mood today, man. But yes, to put it lightly, Orji is not the most skilled passer in the world. You guys can kind of read between the lines there. But Michigan has already been through a lot of quarterback change so far this year. And one thing is, this team is going to need some level of continuity. I know there's a lot of questions around identity with this team. So Brian actually brought it up before of maybe Michigan just goes full Notre Dame 2017-esque and just owns running the football for the remainder of their games. I think adding in a third starting quarterback to the mix potentially for this season would just muddy the waters for a team that has already had a good win against USC. I'm not saying that Alex Orji is going to lead them to the promised land because, Brian, I'm with you. Michigan is not. I don't know if they make the playoffs this year. Even if they do, I don't see them making it very far based on their style of play and what they're handicapped with from a quarterback perspective and a skilled player perspective. So to answer your question, I'm not big on Jaden Davis either. I think he's a better passer than Alex Orji, but that bar is relatively low. So BK, to answer your question, I wouldn't, just to finish out this season with what you have now, because you're not going to go compete for a championship if you're Michigan. Finish out the season now the way that you have it, and then look for a transfer portal quarterback to come in next year. DMND13. As of today, what do you think the depth chart or rotations will be at defensive end and Viper next year? Ooh. And how good will those groups be? Potentially the best at Notre Dame since when?
Well, I am definitely not willing to go there because we just haven't seen any of these guys do it for any kind of period of time. And yes, Boubacar Traore was starting to flash, but now next year he's going to be coming back, and he's going to be when fall camp starts, 10 months removed from, a major surgery, if that's in fact what's going on with him. Jordan Battle is going to be 8-9 months removed from a major knee surgery. I don't know what kind of players are going to be. Most players tend to be better the second year back from a knee injury as opposed to the first knee injury. Are they going to be the same players they were before the injuries? I don't know the answer to that. So who's going to step up? You talk about defensive end and Viper. I think that those positions are also going to be impacted by what's playing inside. You play as one as a defensive line to a degree. So I think Notre Dame has a chance to be very talented at defensive end next year. If you look at the Viper position, I don't even know what that's going to look like because I don't know how healthy guys are going to be. You've got Boubacar and Jordan Patel coming back. You've got Junior Tuilamaka is going to get a ton of snaps this year. I think Josh Burnham's going to kind of get back to playing a lot more snot. He's going to have to help out there, whether they cross-train him or just, have him play there more so. Logan Thomas, what kind of development does he make this offseason? How much of the extra reps he's going to get help him? And then you've got Bryce Young at defensive end. As of right now, with Josh Burnham and Bryce Young, that's really all you have at defensive end. As far as returners, because you moved Cole Mullins inside, you moved Brendan Vernon inside. I don't necessarily agree with either decision there, but that's what you did. And so, who's your defensive end's going to be next year? Is it going to be, Burnham and Bryce Young and what? Chris Burgess as a true freshman, maybe. Maybe. Maybe it's Joseph Reif. Or maybe they go to the portal again. I hope they don't go to the portal for an end. Even Viper just depends on how the injuries are, Trevor. But man. It's too early for me to see that. I need to see Dan. I need to see what does Junior Tuilamaka do now that people have some film on him? Does he keep balling? Because if he keeps balling, he's going to have how do you not take it? Let's say he goes out and gets 5-6 sacks the rest of the year. How are you going to take him off the field? Let's say Josh Burnham moves over to Viper and he balls out and has 5 or 6 sacks. Is Jordan Patel even going to come back next year, knowing he may not be the guy? There's so many things that I just don't know. And I know your question is as of today, but as of today, you can't have Boubacar in your lineup. You can't have Jordan Patel in your lineup. So there's those guys being out. There's just so many unknowns, Dan, that it's hard for me to really have a good feel for what that group's going to look like next year. I will say this. If everyone is healthy, then I share your excitement about how good these two positions can be if everyone is healthy. But as of right now, that's a big if, because the only guy that I can say confidently of the high level guys, Boubacar, and that's going to be healthy is Bryce Young as of for now. So I'll just say this: if everybody's healthy, then the edge position should be really, really good next year. I'm not ready to start saying best since Notre Dame since a period of time, because as of right now, it's not. I can't compare this group to what the 2018 DN rotation looked like, or even 19. In 19, you had Khalid Kareem, Julian Aguara, Dalen Hayes, Adetokunbo Ogundeji. Those are proven, very talented players. I would argue that Boubacar and Bryce Young have more God-given ability than any of those guys.
Yeah.
But they have a lot they have to prove so far. And especially now with Boubacar going down, I need to see kind of what is the extent of his injury, when will he be back. Now, if Boubacar is just out a month and he's back, which again, I don't believe is going to be the case. But if, let's say that is the case, then my stance changes a little bit, Trevor. But, look, it wasn't that long ago that Notre Dame had a defensive end group that was kind of a unit that teams feared. And I know for a fact, because I have some buddies that were part of these conversations, that when Clemson beat Notre Dame in 2018, they were basically celebrating a championship, because when they scouted Alabama, they knew Bama had no chance to stop their offense. Their big concern was, what if Notre Dame shuts us down and those receivers make a couple plays and they knock us off? Because they were the combination of that group of edge players with the corners that Notre Dame had gave them major concerns. Now, it's not they were afraid of Notre Dame, but they knew Notre Dame was going to be a major problem. In the first, 25 minutes of that game before Julian Love went down is exactly what Clemson's fear was. And there was a play where Julian Aguara gets hurt, limps off the field. They bring Adetokunbo Ogundeji on the next play, and he sacks Trevor Lawrence and knocks him out of field goal range. That's what Notre Dame was putting on the field back then. So this group's got a ways to go before I'm going to start putting it on the same level as that group. Now, potentially could it get there? Absolutely. I need to see these kids play healthy and and play more than a couple real. I mean, and Boubacar was really good early in the season, but like it's kind of like Mitchell Evans. Like right now in a 4-year career, Mitchell Evans has 5 good games in a row, like really good games in a row, and outside of that, not a whole lot else. You know what I mean? So what's the real version of him? I need to see Boubacar do it for a period of time. I need to see Bryce turn that elite potential into production. But I'll say this, Trevor, and I'm curious about this. If Boubacar comes back fully 100%, Burnham comes back 100%, Bryce Young just has normal, you're a 5-star development, and then you add Burgess to the group. You've got Logan Thomas ascending, who I think has loads of upside. Junior, I do think potential-wise, this DN group could be better than the 18-19 group, I believe. It's just got a ways to go there. Do you feel that same way about their potential compared to that 18-19 group?
I do, from a skilled standpoint, especially. These are, I firmly believe that the players that you just listed off have a higher ceiling skill-wise in comparison to who Notre Dame had back in 2018. And that is no knock on the 2018 defensive end group, right? Those were a talented group of guys. So I do think, pending everybody coming back healthy, I think that's a conversation you can start having now. But Brian, to your point, it's just so early because there's so many question marks around who comes back healthy with the Jordan Botelho conversation, if he comes back. So a lot of unknown, but I would agree that if pending everybody comes back healthy, this will be a very, very, very talented end group that you can start drawing comparisons to the 2018 defensive line crew and might even be better than them 100%.
I want to respond to something that was just brought up that was in relation to what we discussed. So I'm going to go down and bring this one up. Tommy Gunn said, would you be willing to compromise? This is back to the automatic bids, Trevor. Would you be willing to compromise for the Power 2 conferences to have 3 or 4 automatic bids as long as that same number is the maximum number of teams that the SEC and Big Ten can get in? And my answer would still be no. If I was the football czar, I would say no to that, because I don't want to cheat a team that, let's say there are 5 teams in the Big Ten or SEC, or if the number was 3, locked at 3, there's 4 teams that are capable of competing for a championship. I don't want to lock that team out of the playoff simply because we created an arbitrary number.
Right.
Just like I don't want to keep a 3rd ACC team out or a 5th Big Ten team out because we have to arbitrarily keep the 4th SEC team in, or vice versa. So I don't want to keep out the 5th SEC team that I think can compete for championship because I have to arbitrarily keep the 4th Big Ten team in who has no business being in because we have some arbitrary number. So no, I would not support that. Ideally, I want the 12 best teams. If 7 of the 12 best teams are genuinely from one conference, especially now that you're in the 18-team conferences, because it used to be where, like, if you had 4 SEC West teams in the playoff, it nothing but rematches because they all played each other.
Right.
It's not a given that you're going to have this. Now, what I would say is okay, if you're going to, expand the playoff even more, I'd say it's time to get rid of the conference championships. Like, that's the other thing I would say is, like, you're asking these teams to play 3-4 games in the postseason. We don't need to be playing 13 games in the regular season for these conference champs. But that's a different conversation for a different day. But no, I would not do that because, again, I don't think that's fair to that. Let's say we cut the number at 3. And, you look at this year, from what we've seen of teams, Bama's a championship caliber team, right? And Tennessee is a team that's a playoff caliber team. And then you've got other teams like Texas Texas is in there. So let's say those are the 3. Well, what if they all kind of run the table and Georgia's sitting there and their only loss is a comeback road loss to Bama, and now they can't compete for a championship because they're the 4th team in the league, even though they are a championship caliber team. There's just 3 others ranked ahead of them. Is that good for college football that's being done? Because we've arbitrarily set a number that you get this many guaranteed, but you can't get more than that. I think that hurts the game. Put the best teams in. That's where I'm at. Put the freaking best team. It's that simple. But unfortunately, this isn't about what's best for the game. This is about what's best for people's pocketbooks. That's what it comes down to. So no, I would not support that. Now, if you force me to say there's going to be guaranteed numbers, okay, then I would say whatever that guaranteed number is, you can't go past it either. But you started this. You forced me into this by making me have to take a X number of teams. So don't get pissed at me when you can't get more than that, even though you might be more willing to do so. And this is what bothers me about the Big Ten and the SEC. More often than not, in a 14-team playoff, they're going to have 4 teams in there anyway, and sometimes more than that. But if I'm the ACC and I'm the Big 12 and these other groups to say, fine, you want guaranteed numbers in there? All right, here's the number's going to be 3, and you can't have any more than that. How about them apples? But I think the whole thing sucks. But no, I would not be willing to. I would not compromise at all for a locked number of teams. But if you force me and say, hey, there will be a locked number of teams, figure out the best path for it, then I would go with your situation, Tommy, where I'd say, okay, cool, we're going to have a set number of teams in that league, but you can't go beyond that. So that's my stance on it. So if I had a choice on that compromise, I'd say no, I wouldn't. If you force me to say we're definitely going to have a set number of teams, then I would take that proposition.
Tom Connor, I know it's early, but do you guys believe there is anything to the fact that several of the big-time decommits have not played very well, if at all?
Several big-time decommits. Are you talking about at Notre Dame in general, or are you talking about like in college football? Talking about Peyton Bowen, Keon Keeley. I mean, because Keon Keeley hasn't played well. And I think part of that's because Keon Keeley went to the wrong school. Keon Keeley went to somewhere where they weren't going to give him the structure that I think he needed. Peyton Bowen, I haven't watched Peyton Bowen specifically this year, but last year he was really good.
Yeah.
And nothing about Dante Moore as a freshman made me doubt that, he may not be good. I actually think the best thing Dante Moore ever did was going to Oregon the second time, knowing he was probably going to sit, because I think he needed time to learn. And he was thrust into a situation. So, but do I think there's something to that? I mean, to a degree, I think some of the decommitments are guys that were making decisions for all the wrong reasons. And some of them were very immature decisions. They weren't very thoughtful decisions. And I think that's a factor in why they're not as prepared to thrive the way that they need to. So, yeah. I mean, I think there's something to that, but that's not true for all of them. There's other decommitments that have played well if we go back and look at it. So I think what's skewing it a little bit for you, Tom, is a couple of the big name ones. Dante, Keon aren't necessarily doing a whole lot, but there's some other guys that are playing well in that regard. So here's one, Trevor, that I'm going to bring up, and I'm going to kind of get your opinion first, since I'm dominating the answer so far. But Carrie Later says, when we are talking quarterback development, depending on how the season goes, when do we start plugging in Minchie or Carr? I have hope Notre Dame next year could be great with a clear, good leader quarterback.
I would say, depending on how this season goes, if Notre Dame is still on the winning train and they win out like we believe that they will, they're going to be into the playoffs, right? So I don't think you yank Riley Leonard at any point in time. I think that this conversation is going to be better suited if Notre Dame drops a game sometime between now and post USC, because it's just, I don't really see a scenario where they're going to get too many meaningful minutes. The coaching staff has shown time and time again that they will put in Steve Angeli to get a good amount of snaps this season, which I don't necessarily agree with. But we saw it in the Purdue game. Kenny Minchie and CJ Carr both didn't get in until, I believe, the fourth quarter. So if Notre Dame continues to win, Carrie, to answer your question, you keep Riley Leonard in for the entire season. If they happen to drop a game, whether it be to one of the service schools or they drop it to Georgia Tech, whatever, don't want to speak any of that into existence. But for this situation specifically, if they do happen to drop one of those games, I think you start looking to what the future could be, because whether people want it to or not, Riley Leonard's not going to be here next year. So then you have to, in my mind, start looking to the future as a coaching staff. What about you, Brian?
I said this in the article about the future of the quarterback position. Riley Leonard's your starter right now. He should be your starter right now. No, he has not played up to his potential as a passer, but he's also your best, your leading rusher and a dynamic. And the makeup of your team, your receivers aren't playing great. You've got a young offensive line that allows a lot of pressures to get through. You need a quarterback that can handle that at a high level, and I'm not throwing C.J. Carr and Kenny Minchey into that train wreck right now, even if I thought that they were ready to unseat Riley. You have to look at those things. No responsible coach can look at a situation and say, well, yeah, with no context, that guy's my best passer and my quarterback of the future, so let's throw him in there, and have no context of what's going to be around those players. It's just like we talked about with Jaden Davis and Michigan. You got to know what's around that kid. What I would do, however, is during the bye week, I would have started ramping up reps with the top group, with the twos were for Kenny and CJ, or at least one of them, but those two guys. I mean, the reality is I don't believe Steve Angeli's the future quarterback. I personally don't believe that the staff at Notre Dame believes Steve Angeli's the future quarterback. That's just what I believe to be true. And I believe that those two kids are. And if you're going to start those guys next year, and my understanding is that the expectation is that one of those two is going to start next year, I think it's foolish to have their first significant minutes come against Texas A&M at home. Now you're punting your chances for a championship another year down the road. The other thing too is when you're watching Riley Leonard's body language, he's getting beat the heck up. I have a hard time believing that this young man's going to be able to play every single game this year, the way that Notre Dame is running him. I mean, Sean Davis and I were talking about this earlier today. There was a snap against Louisville where he kind of gets up slow, and he just kind of, you could tell he's banged up, and they ran him on the very next play. And you're like, that's just not sustainable. And a bye week is not going to all of a sudden make him miraculously fully healthy. And so you've got to start planning to have what's your plan if he goes down. And it's like you and I talked about the other day. You need to have a Riley's not good to go plan in your game plan every week. And in my opinion, that plan needs to have number 8 or number 12 at quarterback. That's what I would do. So Riley's my guy, but I need to have a plan for if he's not, for whether he, look, Trevor, the reality is he could come out and play in a way down the stretch that he does warrant getting benched. I don't believe Riley Leonard deserves getting benched right now. The article I wrote about him needing to sit before the Purdue game was based on the injury. Because I said in that, you need him. You can't be the team this year you're capable of without Riley Leonard being Riley Leonard. And if you need to sit him for a couple games to get him physically and mentally right, then that's fine. You should be able to beat these next two teams without him, and then maybe have him back for Louisville. Well, fortunately, Riley came back against Purdue, and his injury wasn't what was reported. And he's or he's just playing through it like a champ. And his play is kind of progressively getting better and better each week, and they've won those games. But he's done this year. And you need to make sure that C.J. Carr or Kenny Minchey, or maybe both, are getting more and more snaps in preparation for when their time comes, whether it's against Stanford, whether it's a month from now, whether it's 2 months from now, or whether it's next season. You can't have their first real minutes be, Kenny Minchey comes off the bench as the third quarterback. He gets one series, leads you on a touchdown, and then you bring CJ in to take a knee. That's not going to get them ready. Now, them getting in and getting some of the work that Steve got, this year, and some of the work Steve got last year, where he got legitimate chances to come run the offense and some blowouts. Yeah, sure. That's helpful. That I would say that they need to do. That's my stance on it. It's to stop with the whole, well, this is the veteran and he's a good, solid player and he can get us out of a game. That's fine. That's all fine and dandy. But it's time for you to start planning for your present needs to start also being about building for your future, not as your starter, because this team right now still is better with Riley Leonard at quarterback. But if he's not there, you need to have a better plan than we're just going to plug in Steve, who's a great kid, great leader, but a limited player behind this offensive line, and go. Now, it might be different if Joe Alt and Blake Fisher would have come back. I might have a different take on that.
Sure.
Because I don't think Steve's going to get pressured as much, and he can run the offense and make a couple throws, but that's not where they're at now, Trevor. And that's why I say it's time to in when it comes to the too deep, start preparing for the future more at quarterback.
100%. There's nothing that Steve Angeli is going to show us that we already haven't seen from him. So you are going to have opportunities as a football team to get your younger guys in early. Theoretically, if Notre Dame shows up and plays the way that they're supposed to, you might have that opportunity against maybe one of the service schools. You might have that opportunity against Virginia or against Florida State. So look, I understand it, but there's nothing that Steve Angeli is going to come out and show us in garbage time that we don't already know about the kid. He can come in and run the offense as a backup quarterback. So I'd like to see 8 and 12 get more of those snap shares. Aiden Benami, have you noticed better breaks or separations from our wide receivers so far? And are they running with more purpose?
No, they haven't. They haven't. Not so far, Aiden. That doesn't need a whole lot more explanation. We kind of broke this down on Tuesday, but no, so far the receiver play has not been what I hoped it would be outside of maybe a couple guys. I mean, honestly, the best route runner so far has been Shane Thomas.
Yeah.
But to me, he's warranted more work. Honestly, he's warranted more work in my opinion.
DMND13. How confident would you be in just having a two-man rotation of Junior and Logan Thomas at Viper?
Not confident. I mean, look, I think there needs to be – I'm okay with both of them playing. And I think right now Junior should start because Josh Burnham's coming back from an injury and is he needs time to get built back up. But I think Logan Thomas is not a guy to me that's ready for 30, 40 snaps a game week after week out. He's 225 pounds.
Man.
But Logan Thomas is going to have a role for me. Logan, for me, would take on the nickel package role that Boubacar had in certain situations where he's going to rush the quarterback. And I would ramp him up a little bit more in those regards because that kid can flip and fly. But as far as like my base down situations, I'd still would want some combination of Junior and Josh Burnham. Yeah. Taking a lot of those early down snaps. And then Logan can become that Logan could be an impactful specialist this year on defense. Just not hey, I'm the guy and I'm giving you 30 snaps a game. That's where I'm at on that. What are your thoughts on that rotation, Trevor?
I'm with you. I don't have much more to add. That would be a really big workload for Logan Thomas, especially being at the weight that he's at. So I would not be very confident in just a two-man rotation. I'm with you. Mohammed Abdi. Brian, do you think an 11-1 Notre Dame team will still need Texas A&M to eliminate Missouri and LSU by beating them at home to avoid a fifth SEC team due to SEC bias?
No. Notre Dame is not getting passed over by a fourth or a fifth SEC team if they're 11-1. There's not. And again, I know that there's an SEC bias, but what Notre Dame fans have not come to grips with yet is there's a lot of anti-Notre Dame bias in different aspects of things. There has never been any anti-Notre Dame bias in the College Football Playoff Committee, ever. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If anything, Notre Dame's had a couple years, they got probably ranked a little bit higher than they should have. I did not watch that Notre Dame team in 2021 and think they're the fifth best team in college football. And they were. Because that's where they were ranked in the final college football playoff rankings. I think they were fifth, right? And then I think Oklahoma State was like sixth or seventh, and maybe Georgia was sixth in 2020. No, Georgia was in 2021. But look, guys, you can't keep saying this is all about money, all about money, all about money, and then be like, but they're not going to bring in a team that's going to bring them as much money as anybody else. I mean, you guys, 11-1 Notre Dame is in. They don't need A&M to eliminate anything and all those things to get in. What those things now, does that mean those games are irrelevant? No, they're not, because we did two predictions so far for Irish Breakdown today, and we'll have a third coming up later. We're going to do the Michigan-Washington one's going to come out later, but I've already published the one for Missouri and Texas A&M and then Louisville and SMU, and I talked about in both predictions that these are both big games for Notre Dame because they potentially help your strength of schedule. But in my view, that's more about seeding than it is about are they going to be in or not. Because if Notre Dame doesn't run the table, I don't know that they're going to be in, and I don't know that they deserve to be in, to be honest with you. And I need to see how the rest of the season goes and what other teams do and all that kind of stuff. But just on how I think the season's going to play out. If Notre Dame loses to one of the teams left on their schedule, they may not deserve to be in. We'll see. It could change. Like if they just go destroy their next 6 opponents and then lose a barn burner to a 1-loss USC team, I might say, okay, they deserve to be in. A&M's ranked, Louisville's ranked, but just as of right now, they may not deserve to be in. If they're 11-1, they'll be in. The question then is, are they a 5, 6, 7, or 8 seed? That's going to be determined by 2 things. Number one, how dominant does Notre Dame look during this running of the table that will commence? Because they will have won 10 straight games by the time we get to the playoff rankings if Notre Dame's 11-1, right? So, but is it a bunch of, scrape by, ugly wins where you don't really impress people? Or do you go out there and start pounding people? Because the reality is Marcus Freeman has to come to grips with, we not only have to win all of our games, but we have to look good doing it in a lot of these games. There's no letting Virginia hanging around. I don't care what Army and Navy's records are. I don't care how much you respect them. If you can beat them by 30 or 40, you need to beat them by 30 or 40. Same thing with every team you play. You need to beat them by the maximum effort possible for your play. So that's all about seeding. And so if A&M ends up winning and knocks off those 2 teams, and maybe they either knock off Texas or play Texas to the wire and they're 9-3 or 10-2, that's great for Notre Dame because you say, hey, we got a road win over a top 15 team from the SEC. That means that maybe Notre Dame gets ranked 5th and that second best SEC team is ranked 6th. Because Notre Dame can say, hey, look, we beat one of your best teams at their place by 10, and so we deserve the 5 seed. And then, let's say Miami goes undefeated and Clemson goes undefeated. And then Clemson beats Miami in the ACC title game in a really close game. And you look and say, hey, look, we smacked Louisville. We beat Louisville. They were the 3rd best team in the league. They went 10-2. We destroyed Florida State. We blew out Virginia. And then you're talking seeding. And that's where I think these games that don't involve Notre Dame matter, is it helps Notre Dame's strength of schedule, which helps the perception, which is going to determine some sort of 5 to 8 seeding. It's not going to determine if they're in or not. An 11-1 Notre Dame team is not only in, they're hosting a game. I just don't know if they're hosting as a 5 or an 8 seed. That's the only question that I have at this point in time, Trevor. I mean, we've talked a lot about this, Trevor. What are your thoughts on? Do you see any scenario with how the rest of these teams, especially considering who these teams have to play?
That's what I was going to add in, right? Like, there's a lot of these top 10, top 12 teams that still have to play each other yet. Teams ranked ahead of Notre Dame that will have to play each other throughout the season. This isn't a question of if a Notre Dame at 11-1 gets in. That, like, if they don't, call it blasphemy, call it whatever you need to, because I don't see a scenario where Notre Dame doesn't get in if they run the table the rest of the season. And the outlier is that 2-point loss in Northern Illinois. So to Brian's point, I think it's all about seeding. And what Marcus Freeman is going to have to accept is there is going to be a little bit of the eye test in there. It can't be from the Brian Kelly era of it's hard to win. That's why we beat a 4-4 team by 6. It can't be anything like that. This team has the capability to go out and run the table and convincingly beat. I'd make the argument every team that's left on their schedule. Yes, USC is going to be a big time game, but I think back to last year, Notre Dame had the returning Heisman winner at quarterback, and they were undefeated and ranked 10th in the country when Notre Dame played them in South Bend last year. And we all know how that game ended up. So Notre Dame has the ability to win and win convincingly against every opponent that they play. A lot of work has to be done, but like we've said in previous shows, up to this point, to this bye, Notre Dame has taken care of business since the Northern Illinois loss. So it's just about where they get seated. It's not a question of if they make it. So I'm with you there, Brian. DMND13 again. Who will have the better college career, Dante Moore or Deuce Knight? Just kidding. Who will have the best?
I would actually probably go with Deuce.
I would too.
Yeah, but again, I don't know where Deuce is going to go. Wait, well, hold on. He just committed to Auburn. I stand by what I said. I'm not sure who Deuce is going to play for, so I need to find out for sure who Deuce is going to play for before I comment on that. But
yeah,
because like you both have issues that they got to work through. I always bet on the guy that's the more dynamic runner because that translates a little bit more. than that. But I mean, I think Dante's far more gifted passer, but Deuce has a stronger arm and he's a much better athlete. So that's why I would go with Deuce.
Yep.
Dante had the higher floor. Deuce has the higher ceiling.
Yep. I agree.
But to your other question, who will have the best Notre Dame career? I mean, if I had to answer that question, and because I love you, Dan, I'm going to answer that question. If I had to guess, I'd go with CJ Carr. But none of those kids being the best would surprise me. None of them. And it's unfair to really include Noah Grubbs in there because the kid's in the middle of his junior season. He's got a lot of football left. But of where guys are right now, I'd go with CJ Carr. And then Kenny Minchie, a very close second. But I'd go with CJ Carr if I hadn't answered that question. What about you, Trev?
Yeah, I think that's really well said. I would go with CJ Carr as well. I think that he is. I think at this point where he's at, where my evaluation lies is where CJ Carr is at right now in his freshman year is slightly ahead of where Kenny Minchie was at this time in his freshman year. So, but again, that is no knock to Kenny Minchie because I think no matter who the starter is next year, whether it's 8 or 12, the argument could be made for both.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to Coach Bent.
Coach Bent 574. Who are your offensive and defensive MVPs so far?
Offensively, I mean, people aren't going to like this, but I don't care. It's Riley Leonard.
100%.
I mean, yeah, he didn't play well in the Northern Illinois game, but you know who else didn't play well? Like everyone else in the team. I mean, your entire offense is built around him. No, he's not been a great passer, but he still made plays with his arm. But he's your leading rusher. He leads your team in touchdowns. He leads your team in rushing. You know, when he hasn't been healthy, is the 2 stretches in games when your offense just fell apart. You know, like when he was banged up against Northern Illinois, they needed everybody else to step up and carry the load, and they didn't. And you know, he got blamed for it. That's the life of a quarterback. Yeah. But your MVP so far has been Riley Leonard. Now, I would argue that it's a sign of your offense struggling that your MVP is a guy that's struggled as much as Riley has thrown the football. I think that's fair to say. Now, who's the most outstanding player? It's Jeremiah Love. But who's the most valuable player? It's Riley Leonard. And I don't know that it's close. Because if Jeremiah Love goes down, that sucks. He's special. But you still have Jadarian Price, and you still have Keidron Young, and you've got Aeneas Williams. If you lose Riley Leonard, your team completely looks different. Because, again, as much as I love Kenny Minchie and CJ Carr as players, I do not want to see them behind this current version of the offensive line. I don't. Yeah. And so, but Riley can maneuver it a little bit better than those guys can. I mean, somebody brought this up the other day. CJ Carr has played basically what Notre Dame has played 20 games so far, or has played 20 quarters so far, right? 5 games, 4 quarters each, 20 quarters.
Yeah.
And Riley Leonard has played basically 17 of those quarters. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
And he's been sacked twice. Steve Angeli's played 2 of those quarters and has been sacked 3 times. Now, that's a problem. You know what I mean? And it's not Steve's fault. It's like the offense. I mean, per se. I mean, Steve's just not a real, avoid the pressure kind of guy against a good pass rush. It's an indictment on the line. Because when you move a guy, because like some of the sacks that Riley's avoided are like, that should have been a sack. That's just a stupid play by Riley. I mean, just stupid good play by Riley Leonard to get away from that. So that's kind of where I'm at on that one.
Yeah, offensive MVP for me. And I'm glad you made the distinction because I was going to bring up Jeremiah Love as well. Outstanding player, Jeremiah Love. Offensive MVP is Riley Leonard based on, and you and I have brought it up before, and I've said it multiple times. Riley Leonard, I think, is the only quarterback in that quarterback room that can make this offensive line look better on paper than what it actually is at right now. Defensive MVP, I'm probably going Xavier Watts because he is one of the, I mean, you can make the argument, the only returning veteran guy that has played to the level of where we thought the expectation was going to be. So my defensive MVP is going to go to Xavier Watts so far, but offensive, yes, I am with you. It is.
Agree.
It's Riley Leonard.
Agree.
Second part of his mailbag question: which young players do you see having the biggest impact after the bye week?
Yeah. I mean, I'm hoping one of the receivers does it, right? I mean, Do we still count Jeremiah Love as a young player?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's a sophomore. Do we
Yeah.
still count him, or are we talking about some of the guys that are maybe a little less proven? I'm hoping it's, if they keep trotting Anthony Knapp out there, I'm hoping that the light goes on for him. I'm moderately encouraged by the fact that, that this last game was his best, so far. You hope that the bye week can help him to kind of grow and build. Maybe a Sam Pendleton, somebody like that. A Jaden Greathouse type of breakout would be really nice on offense. Defensively, I'll say it again, that Leonard Moore's doing great things. Christian Gray's doing great things. But if I'm talking about, guy that I could see having the biggest impact beyond what we've already seen, I really believe if Bryce Young, almost said Bryant Young, that's his daddy, but if Bryce Young can start to show, like, he's had a couple, I don't know if you saw this, Trevor, in the film, he had a couple pass rushes against Louisville where you're like, wow, that's going to be fun to watch moving forward.
Yeah.
They just aren't a great individual pass rushing team right now. And the two guys that had the most wins as pass rushers are now basically done. You're going to need somebody to fill that void. And I don't know if anybody can do that as well as Bryce Young. So that would be my one that could have the biggest impact. But that's more of a wishful thinking projection as much as it is thinking. I mean, it could happen. No doubt he's an immensely talented, but I'm also talking about it because I think it's needed. They need that here over the second half of the season.
Mine is going to be a little bit out of left field, but I think it's going to be Cooper Flanagan. I do. After he comes back healthy, if there is one glaring thing that has been missing from Notre Dame's offense is consistent play out of the tight end room. Mitchell Evans needs time to get right, whether that's physically or mentally. Eli Raridan, same thing. I don't know if it's physically or mentally, but Cooper Flanagan has shown flashes this year. And I think that they're going to try to start getting him involved from what he's able to do in the pass game and as a run blocker. So I'm gonna go Cooper Flanagan on this one.
Yep. Yep. I'm trying to pull this one up, and it's not coming up. There we go. All right.
Irish blooded. What rivalry would you like to see Notre Dame bring back? For me, it's Penn State.
I've said this. I've answered this one before, Trevor, so I'll just quickly remind people of it. There's two that I'd like to see brought back, and then I'll let you answer yours. I've always said this. I would like to see – I would not be opposed to Notre Dame playing Miami on a regular basis. That's a rivalry that I could see that I wouldn't mind seeing. But if I can only pick one, it's Michigan State. I would bring the Michigan State rivalry back for a host of reasons. But that's the one that I would want back. That's my favorite Big Ten rivalry for Notre Dame. Not Michigan. I don't give a rip about playing Michigan. I don't. Purdue's nice because it's an in-state school. They both have good helmets, but that's not a real competitive rivalry, if we're being honest. The Michigan State, I always felt growing up as a kid, they always had Notre Dame and Michigan State had some great classic games. I mean, you think of the game where I'm trying to remember who the receiver was. Was it Omar Jenkins? No, it wasn't Omar. Who was the receiver that caught that pass on the S and then outran the defense in the Bob Davie era, to win that game? You think of, the little giants that worked out well for Michigan State. You think of the game where Plexico went off for Michigan State. You think of the overtime game where Michigan State beat Notre Dame in 2005 and Notre Dame came back and lost. And then the next year, Michigan State jumps up again, 38-17. Notre Dame has a great comeback and wins. There's been some great games between those two teams. Some really classic games. And so, and I know there's been with Michigan, but I despise Michigan. I despise everything about that institution and that program from a football standpoint. And I used to be a Michigan basketball fan, but I mean, Trevor, you and I talked about this the other day, but the way that the program has been run in the last several years, I don't even care about that anymore. But it's just, man, the Michigan State rivalry is just always one that I always looked forward to. When's the Michigan State game? Much more so than the Michigan rivalry. And Notre Dame went decades without playing Michigan, and they were still very good. And you know what Big Ten team was willing to play Notre Dame that entire time? Michigan State. So they're always going to get the nod in my book. What about you?
I think it's interesting because you reference the games that you watched growing up as a kid. And for you, that was Michigan State. For me, that was Michigan. So I think that would be the one for me that I would want to bring back. But it's almost for the same reasons that you have for not wanting to play them. I do not like Michigan. I also despise Michigan. But that's why I want it to be that's how I feel a rivalry should be. That's my own personal opinion. It's just two schools that don't like each other. I don't think it's two schools that disrespect each other, I think that that's a fine line. But for me, growing up, I watched the '05 game at the Big House where Notre Dame won, and the '06 game where they got blown out, and then the game under the lights, like the first night game at Michigan
And
Stadium.
11. I was
Yep.
there, Trevor. I was at that game. It was pretty
Jeez.
awesome.
You know, I grew up watching that game, and then the 2012 game where the entire student section had the lays, and there's just something in me that I don't like that Notre Dame's last matchup against Michigan, they got blown out by in 2019. So for me, like I don't like leaving it on that. I understand historically why, because Michigan over the span of Notre Dame football has been like, yeah, we'll play you. Now we're not going to play you, but now we'll play you again. So there's that aspect. But for me, if I were to bring back anyone, I think that would be mine, because it was that was the rivalry that I grew up watching. So yeah, I would go the Wolverines.
That's why I would do Miami, because it's more of a heated rivalry, but I think there's more in it for Notre Dame to play Miami. I don't think there's anything in it for Notre Dame to play Michigan. I don't. But yeah, I know I'm in the minority. I do know that when it comes to this view. I think most Notre Dame fans that I know want the Michigan rivalry back. So I do realize that I'm not on the same page.
In your defense, though, like Notre Dame and Michigan State have had awesome games too, because in that same time span of the '05, '06, where I was watching Michigan, the '05 Michigan State game at home that went into overtime.
Those games were both better than the '05, '06, because in the '05 Michigan game, Michigan wasn't very good. I mean, it was a close game, but it was an ugly game. Like neither team looked very good. Raymond got hurt in that game. Then '06, they blew Notre Dame out. Both of the games against Michigan State were great games.
Yeah,
and of course, one worked out, one didn't. But there's also a lot of other personal reasons for me. You know, like knowing that Michigan is the team that kept Notre Dame out of the Big Ten twice because of their anti-Catholic bigotry. And I understand it's not the same people now, but it's just kind of like, you know what, wounds heal, but that doesn't mean I don't have a scar. You know what I mean? And I'm a big believer in forgiveness, but forgiveness doesn't mean that, if somebody comes over and babysits your kid and they leave for a few hours and leave your kid alone, and they apologize profusely, you may give them forgiveness, but you're not going to let them babysit anymore. You know what I mean? Like there's a difference between forgiving something and saying, okay, but now we're cool now. We can engage in this thing again. No, I forgive you and I've moved past it, but we're moving in a different direction kind of thing. And that's how I am with Michigan. So I'm over Michigan. We do have a couple super chats though, Trevor.
Super chat from Will Falk. Thank you, Will. It doesn't seem like Notre Dame has any packages with quarterback under center. Can you talk about the philosophical considerations in shotgun versus under center?
There's certain things you do run game wise that can be really advantageous under center in a true running game where you don't have your quarterback involved in the running game. I like that he said philosophical considerations, because that's a very astute way of phrasing that, because it is 100% a philosophical discussion. There's no practical advantage nothing infuriates me more when I listen to announcers talk about how they didn't pick up that first down because they didn't go under center. Like I've never seen a team line up under center and get stuffed. I remember Stanford going under center and trying to tie a game against Notre Dame, getting stuffed. I remember Stanford going under center on a fourth down against TCU in a bowl game against stuffed. I remember USC under center on fourth down against Texas with Lendell White at running back and getting stuffed. Let's not act like the only teams that get stuffed on short yardage situations are teams in the shotgun, right? Like that's some revisionist history if I've ever seen it. That's a lot of people's philosophical preference, and I understand that. I watched Florida with Tim Tebow never go under center. I don't care if it was 4th and inches or 4th and goal from the 2-inch line. Tim Tebow was going from shotgun. I don't remember Florida getting stopped in a whole lot of short yardage situations. It's more so about your scheme and how you block it and how you protect it. Like the mistake that Notre Dame made on the 3rd and short against Louisville, Trevor, was they checked to a slower developing play.
Yeah,
that any penetration is going to blow up. And that's true on handing the ball off. I mean, remember the big hit that Keenan Tatum put on the USC guy under center? You know what I mean? And so if you don't get a push up front and you don't get all the gaps secured, I don't care where you're snapping the ball to, it's going to get stuffed.
Mm-hmm.
You can say, well, yeah, but what about quarterback sneaks? But what if the center gets knocked off the ball? There's nowhere to go. Whereas if you do a shotgun snap with Riley Leonard, he can kind of get downhill, find the hole, and then get behind it, right? Like he did on multiple fourth downs this year. And then the ones he got stopped, it's not because they went for 2 fourth downs on the same drive against A&M, got the first one, didn't get the second one with the same exact quarterback play. Did the same thing against Louisville. What's the difference between the two? On one, they had a push. On the other, they didn't have a push, right? So I've never bought into that. I think it's a philosophical thing of what you prefer. There's certain running plays that I think are better suited from under center. I think the old school power O is a better running play under center, in my opinion. And if you're going to run power out of the shotgun, it's just blocked a little differently and hits a little bit differently. And that's why I kind of like quarterback power with the read, quarterback power with the read concept out of shotgun. There are some plays that I think hit better on I think zone. The inside zone game changed dramatically when the read was basically put in with Rich Rod back in the day. When he was at Glenville State, then of course he brought it to I think Tulane. No, not Tulane. Yeah, Tulane and then Clemson, right? Changed the way the inside zone was blocked because, and doesn't mean you couldn't do it under center, but like that became such a dynamic play out of shotgun and out of 11 personnel, which inside zone was a really tough play to run back in the day out of 11 personnel under center. It was a tougher play to run. When we ran it, we would run it with out of 21 personnel or 12 personnel, Trevor. That's how we would run it. Because you needed to secure the front side gap with the crash and you needed to be able to secure the backside, cutoff lane. You had to do both. Under shotgun, your quarterback now becomes an effective blocker. And I think that's an element that people don't take into consideration. So just for me, Will, it just comes down to both work great if you scheme it and block it appropriately. That's my take on it. And I know that there's people that disagree, and that's fair. That's fine. But I could give you tons of evidence that says that there are teams that are dominant in short yardage situations that never go under center. And, Urban Meyer's Ohio State teams are the same way. They never went under center. And they were go ask Alabama in 2014 if that was a team that was you could stop in short yardage situations. It was Will Falks. Arnez Battle was the one that caught that pass against Michigan State that I was thinking of. I was thinking it was I don't know why I was thinking Omar Jenkins. But it's Arnez Battle. It's a good call on that one. So those are that's my take on that. Trevor, do you have a firm stance on this one?
Yeah, I think it depends on the personnel that you have, whether you go shotgun or under center. I think if Notre Dame goes more under center this year, it takes out Riley Leonard's most dangerous threat, which is his legs, which is why I think that you don't see a lot of Notre Dame go under center, because it's hard for a quarterback to be effective with his legs under center, short of running just quarterback dives or some form of the triple option, which I know is not what Mike Denbrock is wanting to do with Riley Leonard. So I think to answer your question about why you haven't seen many packages about it this season is because of Riley Leonard and his ability to make plays in the run game. But Brian, I'm very much aligned with you that you don't have to be under center in short yardage situations to be successful. Just don't.
If I had Reggie Brooks and Jerome Bettis, would I be in the shotgun all the time? Nope.
Right.
I'd run a different offense. That's a great point, Trevor. Great point. But you then recruit to that personnel of what you want to be.
100%.
We have a super chat and then a follow-up from Joe Papiti here.
Sounds good. Thank you for the super chat, Joe. When was the last time Notre Dame went and got a public high school skilled position from the South? I hate to say it, but I don't think that the 4 for 40 resonates with these players.
And then his follow-up, I'll just speak to this, Joe. I'm not going to kind of go down and list all the Southern public school kids they've got, but there's a whole lot of considerations that go into this beyond 4 for 40. It has nothing to do with 4 for 40 resonating, but is 4 for 40 going to resonate louder than I don't want to be that far away from my mother? I don't want to be that far away from where all my friends are playing. Like if I play in a certain really good league in the South, all my friends are going to play at the SEC and Southern ACC schools. So I think we have this thing where we've convinced ourselves as Notre Dame fans that every time a kid doesn't pick Notre Dame, it's because he doesn't care about academics. And a lot of times the 4 for 40 is the only reason some of those kids even look at Notre Dame.
Right.
right? It's just the 4 for 40 can't resonate with the fact that you're still in South Bend, Indiana, and you're still this and you're still that, and these other type of things that factor into it. So it's like if a kid doesn't pick Notre Dame, it's because he doesn't care about the 4 for 40. And I've said over and over again, yeah, he does. That's the only reason this, like, you'll see these kids, it'll be like he's got a final 5 of Georgia, Alabama, Florida State, LSU, and Notre Dame. And he'll pick, oh, he clearly cared about that. Like, why do you think they were the only Northern team in his top 5? Because that part did resonate with him, just not enough to say, I'm going to still go away from home and, do this type of thing. So, like, look, I remember as an adult going away to college, or when I went away to college and I was like 4 hours away from my parents, and that was like, that's really far. It felt to me at the time. And I remember the first time I really moved away from my family when I got into coaching. I moved to Ohio, and I could rarely see my family outside of football because they would always come up and watch me coach, which I thought was weird at the time. But then you look back and like, my family's pretty awesome. But that was tough. And I was an adult. I was an employed, graduated adult. I just think we connect dots that don't necessarily exist. When in reality, the thing you think that's not resonating, I would say you're missing the boat, because a lot of times that's all that resonates. I think the 4 for 40 is the thing that got Deuce Knight to commit in the first place. It just wasn't enough to keep him. So it's not that it didn't resonate. It's just that a lot of other factors became more important to him. Some understandable, some not understandable. So I just think it's, and as far as like public school kids, Tavon Coney was a pretty darn good one, so he was a pretty darn good one. And Notre Dame signed plenty of public school kids from Florida and the South in general. And a lot of times it's like these kids go to private schools because that's really all that's in the area. You know what I mean? It's not because they're very well, like Gerby Lambert doesn't come from we have these stereotypes of what we think kids that go to private schools are like. He comes from a very blue collar family. He doesn't come from some well-to-do family, but he came from a blue collar family that really valued the opportunities that their son could get at that type of place. And in that area, there's not a lot of public schools where you're going to be able to be developed as a young man and yet developed as a football player. And so I don't necessarily agree with that entire sentiment. Look, how's Deuce Knight any different from Dante Moore? He's a Northern kid. He's from Michigan. How's Dante Moore any different than CJ Carr? Both public school kids from Michigan. Why'd one do the way he did it and the other did the way he did it? There's always more factors into it. We always try to make these things real simple, and a lot of times they're really not. And then here's Joe's follow-up to that.
Plus, Notre Dame isn't exactly a shining example of developing quarterbacks. I don't blame Deuce for his decision. I just don't like how he handled it. I think he played us.
First of all, don't talk to me about Notre Dame being at fault for not developing quarterbacks for a kid who freaking chose to go play for Hugh Freeze. Okay. If he'd have gone and played for Lincoln Riley, or if he'd have gone to want to play for Ryan Day or a school that actually develops quarterbacks, I'd be like, all right, I understand it. Cool. I'd maybe consider, considering how many number 1 overall, what has Lincoln Riley now produced? 3 number 1 overall draft picks. The guy, I don't even know if is he 40 yet? Barely 40.
No, I think he's 38.
He's produced 3 number 1 draft picks and Jalen Hurts. So don't talk to me about, oh, it's because Notre Dame doesn't develop quarterbacks. He's playing for Hugh Freeze. Like, don't know, especially when the same kid talked about what Mike Denbrock does as if Dante, and if I don't know if Deuce is blaming that or saying that, that's fine. He can say whatever he wants, but it's not true. Doesn't make it true. And I've said this. I do agree. The second part is, look, I don't blame Deuce for his decision, because kids have to do whatever's best for them. I transferred in college. Like I made a decision that was best for me. I made a decision based on very immature reasons. I get it. It happens. But there's a right and a wrong way to do it. And Deuce did not do it the right way, in my opinion. And do I think he played Notre Dame? Eventually, yes. Do I think he did it initially? Do I think when Deuce committed to Notre Dame, he played them? No, I don't. I think Deuce Knight, for a long time, had every intention of going to Notre Dame. I think just he kind of blew up this summer, got a little too big for his britches, and was being pulled in a lot of different directions and by family and coaches and recruiting analysts. I'm just going to say that recruiting analysts also pulling Deuce in different directions, because there's a lot of people that are covering recruiting now that are trying to be influencers, not reporters. And that's another thing that's not being talked about enough. That's a problem as well. And Deuce kind of fell into that trap. That's on him. And so, yeah, I don't have any. If Deuce thinks Auburn's the best thing for his future, best of luck to you, young man. That doesn't justify how you conducted yourself the last 3 months at all, right? And so, but yeah, but I'm not. Notre Dame deserves zero blame for Deuce Knight's decision. None. You know what I mean? Like none. They recruited their butts off. The current OC developed a top 5 draft pick last year. The current quarterback's coach developed a 3rd-round draft pick like 3 years ago at Cincinnati. You know what I mean? So don't talk to me about quarterback development. Who's the one quarterback Hugh Freeze has had drafted? Isn't it something like Chad Kelly?
Something.
Like the best quarterback he had at Ole Miss hates him and publicly says so recently. You know what I mean? And Bo Wallace. So don't talk to me about quarterback development when you chose to go play for Hugh Freeze. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, I also don't like Notre Dame isn't exactly a shining example. Like talking about the school, I mean, he chose Auburn. Outside of having Cam Newton for 1 year in 2010, their other most notable quarterback is Bo Nix for 3 years, who got significantly better after he left Auburn, right? So I mean, I know Nick Marshall had that good run in 2013 and 2014, but look, at the end of the day, everybody wants to point the finger at somewhere, and I know it's easy to do it at Notre Dame, but to Brian's point, Notre Dame did everything correct in this. Deuce Knight made a decision based on what he thought was the best for him. I do not think he went about it the best way in the world, but
went about a pretty horrible way. We can be honest about that.
Fair enough, but I don't like this. Notre Dame fumbles the bag again because they also went and flipped Kenny Minchie and they got CJ Carr, and they're still, it's early, but still on track to get Noah Grubb. So look, I don't know. Look,
here's the deal. If you think playing for Hugh Freeze is a better decision for Marcus Freeman, that's on you. You can make that decision. I don't care. Just do it the right way. But sure. I'm also very, very, I'm very done talking about Deuce Knight.
Yep.
Like I'm hoping that this is the last question we have about Deuce. But no, I never blame a kid for a decision ever. I blame a kid for how he handles himself in sure. making that decision known and going through the process. That's that's more my issue.
DMND13. Would a Sean Stiers, Ryan Harris duo be the best possible combination for the NBC broadcast team?
I'd be cool with that.
Yeah.
I mean, I listened to, I don't listen to the broadcast. I tell people that, but I actually listened to, when I heard how bad it was, I listened to some of the broadcasts on Saturday, just some of the parts, and I'm like, oh man, Jason Garrett, like that was bad. Mm-hmm. That was really bad. Like that was, yeah. I get where people are coming from. Like Mike Mayock used to get accused of being anti-Notre Dame, and I'd listen to him like, you guys are just paranoid. Like I don't know what you guys are like. He's being critical. That's the way he does analysis. It's like it deserved it. So I thought Mike Mayock did a great job. But then I listened to Jason Garrett from Saturday. I'm like, this guy's clueless. Things have changed since so. And I'm like, dude, that's literally a rule. You can't blindside a guy. You can't. You can't do those. It's not about whether you got his helmet in front. That's not the rule. 20 years ago, that shouldn't have been a penalty on that Louisville kid. But this isn't 20 years ago. This is a penalty now. And, it's just like you not knowing the rule has nothing to do with whether or not that's a penalty or not. And, it was pretty bad. I'm going to be honest with you. It was pretty bad. It was pretty bad listening to it. And I kind of felt like Paul Burmeister kind of fell into the going along with him thing because a play-by-play guy can't be sitting there getting into disagreements with the color guy. It's almost kind of like you have to go along with him a little bit and then let the official guy kind of. But like the offense, some of that stuff, the offense, the double pass interference thing, like that was I didn't know that was a rule either. But then like the last pass interference that they thought should have been called, I'm like, if anything, that should have been offensive pass interference on that last play. It was bad. And I was like, okay, I get it. I get where y'all are coming from. In this case, y'all are justified in thinking that there was some bias, because Jason Garrett absolutely sound like people say, and you've said this, Trevor, and I'm with you. I don't really care about a pro Notre Dame broadcast team. I want a good broadcast team. Like if Notre Dame went over to Fox, and let's say in 5 years they went to Fox, and part of the deal was, okay, we're going to go to Fox, but we want Gus Johnson and Joel Klatt to do every game. Cool. I'd be happy with that, because they do a great job. There's sometimes they're going to be critical of Notre Dame, sometimes not, but they're entertaining. And Joel Klatt's, I don't love Joel Klatt's podcasts and some other takes he has, but when he's doing a game, he's usually really good. And I enjoy that. I mean, I don't need him to be a pro Notre Dame guy. But I do need you to not be an obvious, I'm kind of going against Notre Dame. And that's where I felt like Jason Garrett was there. I used to think Pat Hayden was that way a lot, to be honest with you. I thought Doug Flutie was that way a lot, for sure. Where it's okay, you're not being fair. You're being harder on Notre Dame than you are the opponent. Now you're almost going too far in your quote unquote, we're not a Notre Dame broadcast. That's where I have a problem. And I think Jason Garrett, and this is now the second time that I've kind of been forced to listen to Jason Garrett. And I'm I come away with sort of the same feeling. I don't know, you went to Princeton. I thought you'd be you'd like those higher level schools or something, but it's it's weird.
Yeah. When you're calling games for a big network like NBC, CBS, Fox, you have to be unbiased, call the game for what it is. And if it's an exciting game, call an exciting game.
Yeah.
For the fans out there that want that Notre Dame homer feel to it, listen to the radio call. It's fantastic. But I think of the radio call last year in the Duke game when Ryan Harris was just going berserk when Audric Estime broke free on the touchdown. That's awesome. And that's awesome to hear. If you want to listen to that, listen to the radio. But my biggest ask, and Brian, I know that you've already said it, but it's just call a good game unbiasedly, whether it's in favor of or not in favor of Notre Dame. Just call the game for what it is. And it's the play-by-play guy in the Louisville game was different than the first couple home games. It was better. But yeah, Jason Garrett, that was tough. That was a tough listen.
Somebody asked, why is the NBC broadcast team so bad? They don't even know the players. Who would you like to see calling the Irish? Someone who's not stop giving me the B team. Stop giving these guys fresh out of football that are trying to learn how to be broadcasters. Notre Dame should not be your minor league team for your broadcasters, number one. And number two, demand excellence. This is the thing. In so much of sports media now, we don't demand excellence anymore. We put name people out there, known figures out there, and we don't hold them to a high standard. I think, isn't Stephen A. Smith the highest paid guy at ESPN? He's certainly in that conversation.
I think he's up there.
I'm sitting there listening to him give football takes. I'm like, dude, you don't even know that this guy isn't even on the team anymore. You're talking about Dwayne Haskins being a mobile quarterback. But that's why are you asking Stephen A. Smith he's a football fan? Let him talk about basketball all day. That's the sport he knows. Why is he talking about football in anything other than a fan conversation?
Sure.
But we do that with so much. It's we get these big name players, the former NFL guys, and I got to listen to them. I'm like, just because you play in the NFL doesn't mean you know the game, A, or B, the way that a coach would or an analyst would, or B, doesn't mean you have to express yourself or analyze it the same way. And we got all these former players, and I'm like, this guy's terrible. I get it. Chris Sims coached it played at Texas. Wonderful. His dad played in NFL. He's a terrible analyst. And if his name wasn't Sims, he wouldn't even have a podcast with 200 subscribers. You know what I mean? It's how about we just demand excellence? And sometimes it's going to be in the form of a former player, and other times it won't be. But just demand excellence. And if Jason Garrett's bad at this, then find somebody else to do it. For the love of all things holy, just find someone good at the job. That's all I care about. So that's kind of where I'm at on this one.
I would
find somebody good.
I would love to see Mike Tirico come back.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's not going to happen.
I know.
Yeah. So anyway, let's get back to some more questions. Y'all trying to get me fired up today.
Irish Blooded asks, if you were the offensive coordinator this year, do you lean into the ground-based attack, and just make that more of the primary, or What do you use to switch to a more pass-oriented attack?
It's none of the above. Like we do too much of this in conversations, Irish blooded now, and I understand why you're talking about this. Where it's like, okay, we're going to go into a run-oriented attack or a pat. No, be a balanced offense that can hurt teams running and throwing. Is your bread and butter this year going to be running the football based on what we've seen so far? Yeah, but you still need to have a pass attack that balances it, that can hurt teams, that forces teams to have to defend you a certain way, and if they don't, you make them pay for it. That's how it should be. But this current team is going to be a team that's going to build everything that around being able to run the football. It's just your pass game has to be more competent. So, no, I don't think they need to switch to a more pass-oriented attack. I think they need to be more effective throwing the football, which is going to make the run game even better. And the reality is the one thing your offensive linemen do best is run block. They don't pass block very well. They run block really well. And so that's another example of, like, you have an O-line that can't pass block and a dynamic athlete at quarterback. You're going to be a running team this year. Whether we like it or not, that's the reality, Trevor. And so lean into that. But that doesn't mean you look like 2017 Notre Dame either. They shouldn't be that either. They just need to be a team that can be more effective throwing the football. I mean, we talked about this the other day. Dude, if this team just averaged like 230 passing yards a game the rest of the way and just 8 yards an attempt, they'd be really hard to beat because the way they play defense, the way they run a football. But unfortunately, that's way above where they've been so far this season as a passing football team. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. Aiden Benami. As our blitzing with inexperienced players improved through 5 games, who has been the best linebacker, including all of them?
I don't know if I would say we got asked this the other day. I don't know that I'd say there's been a better line. I mean, I think they've all had their moments. I don't know that I would say anyone's better. I think they've all had their moments, but their blitzing has gotten better. Yes, it's not where it needs to be, but it's gotten better. Yeah, but I don't know that. I don't know if you have an answer, Trevor. You're like, oh yeah, I think this guy's been the best. There's been games where Drake was the best, games where Jaden Osbury is probably their best, games where I thought Kingston was their best. So I think they're all up and down, but just as a group, what I love about this linebacking core is as a group they're playing well. They're starting to play really well. That's what I would say.
I'm with you. I don't think there's one that you can crown as the best linebacker. They've all had their moments. I think this would be a more interesting question after, like, once we get to the second bye week to see what this next stretch of 3 games starts to look like, and if any of those young guys can start piecing together more consistent plays.
Yeah.
Mark Avalone, you are high on Brom's offensive creativity, and if Coach Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame part ways in the future, how does the reported dirty play by Louisville impact Notre Dame's administration perception of Brom?
I don't know that that'll have a huge impact on it, but I will say I thought that was a little disappointing. I'm a big Jeff Brom fan. I thought Louisville played like a very dirty football team on Saturday, but I don't know how he's going to handle it. I mean, we don't know how he's dealing with it behind the scenes. You're not going to say that publicly, but I thought, yeah, but I didn't notice that in the other games that I watched because I'm looking at the all 22. But I don't know, Trevor, if you saw on TV copies that they look like that in the past. I wonder if that just had something to do with Notre Dame, or is that how they normally are? Because I don't remember them being dirty last year, but I could have just maybe blocked it out of my head because of how bad everything else was.
They had some questionable calls that were like slightly late, not as egregious as what it was against Notre Dame. I think it was just kind of the hype around the game for them. And I think one thing that to point out historically, like a lot of teams coming to Notre Dame Stadium and do that because that's we say it all the time. Notre Dame is a lot of teams Super Bowls, whether we like it or not. And the emotions run high whenever teams come and play Notre Dame, especially in South Bend. So, I mean, I remember there was almost a fight in the tunnel in the 2022 Clemson Notre Dame game at halftime.
Yeah.
And that's out of character for a Dabo Swinney team, in my opinion. I don't think that has anything to do with him as a coach.
It had to do with the fact they were getting their freaking butts kicked.
Yeah. Yep. 100%.
Well, I mean, heck,
100%.
the teams I grew up on, Notre Dame used to get in a fight every week in the tunnel when I was a kid. You know what I mean? Like Miami, Michigan, USC, like they were always getting in those type of deals. But no, Notre Dame can kind of do that.
Mm-hmm. John Leahy, did Georgia make the wrong quarterback decision with Beck over Vandegrift?
Not even a little bit.
Nope.
I mean, look, number one, Carson Beck went to Kentucky and won the game, and I realized that Carson Beck didn't play well that game, but he still played a whole lot better, in my opinion, than what Brock Vandegrift played in that game. I mean, Carson Beck went 15 of 24 for 160 yards. Not great, right? Well, Carson Beck went Brock Vandegrift went 14 to 27 for 114 yards. Yeah, but he's playing against Georgia. Have you seen that Georgia secondary this year? I would argue that Kentucky has a better secondary right now than Georgia does outside of one guy.
Yeah.
Look, Carson Beck is looking more like what he actually is, not what the hype was, but he's still a much better quarterback so far than Brock Vandegrift. I mean, this kid went 3 of 10 for 30 yards and got benched against South Carolina. So, he had a nice game against Ole Miss. He did. No question. But, I mean, do I need to remind you what Carson Beck did against Ole Miss last year when he went 18 to 25 for 306 yards in a 52 to 17 win? Also ran for 30 yards. Carson Beck's a much better player than Brock Vandegrift. So, no, I don't think they made a mistake there at all. I'm going to ask this one, Trevor, because I don't really have one because I've never partaken in game day very often. But I know you've been to a lot of games as a fan. Irish Blooded asks, favorite game day tradition on campus?
I don't know if you can necessarily call this a tradition, but anybody that has gone to a Notre Dame tailgate knows what I'm talking about. I've been to other schools where tailgating is supposedly a big thing, and it pales in comparison to a good Notre Dame tailgate, in my opinion. I don't know if you could just say tailgating is a Notre Dame tradition because everybody does it, but I think a Notre Dame tailgate is different. If I had to pinpoint one specific one, I love the players walk when they leave the section of the Golden Dome there and walk to the stadium. I love that. Lauren went to her first. She got to see the walk last year for the first time and got to really soak in an entire game day experience, which is something that I've been doing since I was 6 years old. And she kind of succumbed to it and was like, all right, I understand why you love this. So my favorite game day tradition is honestly the tailgate. It's just everybody's in good spirits. Everybody's really nice. So Ryan, I'll hit you up on that. You got it. But yeah, love a good Notre Dame tailgate. It's probably mine.
My wife's is the Trumpets Under the Dome. That's the one she likes. I have only been to 3 Notre Dame games as a fan. So I've been to a lot more than 3, but they're always like, I'm working. And so I'm either tailgating or I'm there. But my wife likes the Trumpets Under the Dome. That was pretty cool.
Yep.
For me, it's just when I was here on campus as a fan, it's just like I just love my favorite tradition for me, just walking around campus, just enjoying all the different sights and stuff. It's just a beautiful thing. And the thing I like about, I don't do it very often because again, I'm usually working, but the thing I do like about walking around campus now is just running into people that watch the show and stuff like that. I was in the elevator after I met this great couple from Connecticut, and I was in the elevator after the Louisville game, and I'm on the phone with my buddy Jeff, and I got the look, and I know what that look looks like. That's that. Hey, I recognize that guy look. You know what I mean? And so they started talking to me and took a picture, and it was great meeting them. And I'm so sorry I forgot their names, but that was really cool. But that's the thing. That's the only reason I really like walking around campus now is because it's like you get a chance to meet people that are fans of the show and watch our show and love Notre Dame. And that's always cool. And I've always told people, if you ever see me out in public, like feel free to come up and talk to me. Like I appreciate y'all very much. I'm not one to be like, this is my private life, leave me alone. No, I think it's cool. I think it's great, and I appreciate y'all. But that's the part too. But it's like, if you've never been or you haven't been very often, just walk around and enjoy it. It's just a beautiful, beautiful campus. But that's not a tradition. That's just kind of like, just a cool, relaxing thing. I may do that for one of these games this year, Trevor, is just kind of get there early and just walk around and just soak it in, because especially if it's a sunny day, it really is a gorgeous campus.
Oh, yeah. You have my commitment, Brian. The next time I see you in public, I will definitely come up and say hi.
Yeah, well, I mean, because I sign
you.
your paychecks. I mean, you probably should do that. That's just being smart. There's nothing in it for the other fans. There's something in it for you.
I'll tell you how much I love Irish Breakdown. I got you, man. I got you.
I appreciate that. I already know. Trust me.
Wyatt Kerwan. Based on your recruiting evaluation, do you think Anthony Rizak has the talent to be a number 3 or even number 2 quarterback at Notre Dame down the road, therefore reducing the need to go to the portal for quarterback depth?
Maybe. I mean, I think Anthony Rizak can absolutely be part of your quarterback depth chart, to the point where if you want 4, he can be one of those 4 down the road. Will that be next year? I don't know. Will it be 2 years from here? I don't know. But can he be part of a 4-man depth chart? Absolutely. But I don't know if it'll be next year. And there's a chance that you may need a portal guy to get to 4.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you just don't know. You always have to be prepared for that. When you're talking about the modern portal era, you always have to be prepared. You always have, even if you don't, hey, we're planning on having 5 quarterbacks next year. You still keep your back office people still need to make sure they have a list of quarterbacks they can go after if you need it, whether it's a starter, whether it's a depth guy. You have to have that list, because you never know nowadays. I mean, who thought Jaden Mickey was just going to bail on the team after 4 games? Man, I didn't think that. I mean, I thought if he's going to leave, he would have left before the season. I thought once the season started, he was going to be there. And but so you always have to be prepared, Trevor. Always have to be prepared. But if your goal is to have 4 quarterbacks in your roster and Anthony Rizak is one of those 4, I'm good. I'm good. Starting next season. Right now, he's a true freshman, you know what I mean? And he's transitioning to a different type of offense. In the future, I'm good. But there may come a day where, like, I don't want Anthony Rizak at quarterback anymore. I may be like, hey, man, you're a little too athletic to be sitting back here just throwing the ball around. I need you to do something different. Sure. You know what I mean? That may happen at some point in time. We'll see. But I'm okay having Anthony Rizak as one of my 4 at some point in time down the road, because he's a really athletic kid. He's never going to be like a, hey, let's go out there and throw for 300 yards kind of guy necessarily. But he's a smart, athletic kid that could say, hey, look, if you ever get in a situation where Anthony Rizak's got to get out of a game, you're going to do a lot of quarterback runs, a lot of read zones, and some play actions, and you're going to be okay, and you'll get out of that game. But and that's exactly what you need your 3rd and 4th quarterback to be. Can you get us out of a game? And that's what he is.
I agree. Mark Avalone again. Regarding team letdown games, have you ever an explanation from Coach Holtz as to how the 1993 team prepared or is unprepared for Boston College after Florida State?
I've never heard that. I haven't. I do think the one thing that often gets lost about that 1993 Boston College team is that was a really good BC team. That was not Northern Illinois. You know what I mean? Like, that was when they played Notre Dame, they were the number 17 team in the country. Now, they had no business beating Notre Dame, right? Like, we can all agree on that. But they had already beaten number 13 Syracuse on the road. They'd beaten a ranked Georgia Tech team on the road by 14, or Virginia Tech team on the road by 14 points. Like, that's a pretty good BC team. Should not have beat Notre Dame, right? But that was a little bit of a different animal than playing, Northern Illinois or Stanford in 2022. But disappointing, heartbreaking loss. But I mean, and they fell behind big time. I just think it's one of those things where they were so up for the Florida State game that it's just almost, and you had 1 game left. Like, hey, we've clinched a spot in the championship game. We just got to hold off BC. And I just don't think the team was locked in. And that's really what it boils down to. It really is.
Christopher Crosby. The younger guys on this team, especially on defense, seem to play with a different mindset. Why do you think that is, and how do you get everyone up to that level?
Keep recruiting guys like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, honestly, it's about a culture overhaul. It's about keep recruiting guys that have that mindset. Keep recruiting. I mean, and you talk to Jadon Blair. We're going to have another article with Jadon Blair up the other day, or tomorrow, that we had with him the other day. And I spent maybe 20, 30 minutes on the phone the other day with that. I'm like, this is a really confident kid, and the kind of confident you expect at Notre Dame, like intelligent, articulate, thoughtful. Like he's not saying things like, I probably shouldn't have said that. Can you not put that in the interview? None of that from Jadon. Like he is a really bright kid. But he's also a very confident kid that's like, I plan on playing the day I arrive at Notre Dame. And it's not that he expects them to play him. It's that I know that if I do the work, I'm that guy and I'm going to play. Dallas Golden has that mindset. Christian Gray had that mindset. And Adon Schuler had that. I mean, Adon Schuler thought he should have played last year. That's just kind of Adon Schuler. You know what I mean? Like that's how he is. And you want that. Now you want guys that if they're not playing are going to still be great teammates. And that's an important thing. But you need guys with some fire. You need guys with some edge. You get some guys that know they're dudes and want to go out there and show everyone that they're dudes. And that when the lights are brightest, they are like, this is my time to shine. You know what I mean? Like that's what you want. And it comes down to recruiting guys like that. That's what and then developing that mindset where Brian Kelly, we've said this a million times, Brian Kelly the guys that they would recruit in that did have that mindset, they'd spend their whole careers tamping that down. And I don't think Marcus Freeman necessarily wants to do that. At least I haven't seen evidence of it yet. He wants more of that. So you want to, how do you get everyone to that level? Honestly, keep recruiting it and then allowing those players to play with that mindset.
100%.
And there's a difference between that mindset and I think I'm good and I deserve playing time. Like there's some guys in the upper classes that are not getting as much playing time as they like, and they're not happy about it, but they didn't work to get it. They just thought they kind of, from the time they got it, they thought they just deserved it, and they've never put in the work to get it. That's not the case with Drake Bone. That's not the case with Jaden Alsbury. It's not the case with Christian Gray and Kingston Williams and Adon Schuler. Yeah, they all look. I know that Drake thought he should have played more last year. I know Adon did. He should have played more last year. But they were still great teammates, and they worked their butts off every day. And they made sure that next year, I promise you, I'm not going to be sitting on the sidelines next year. And so come back January, work. Jadon Blair has a very confident act. He's very talented, but I promise you, Jadon Blair's not going to come to Notre Dame and be like, well, you're just going to put me ahead of Bronte Johnson and Adon Schuler and Luke Talents, right? Just because I'm that dude because you recruited me. No, it's like, I'm going to show y'all who I am every day with how I work. And it's just recruiting that right mindset. It's hard to develop an 85 guys who don't have that mindset into that mindset. Sure. A smart coaches know you recruit that mind. He's a little cocky, but he's a hard worker and a great teammate. He's a little arrogant. All right, cool. Give me that guy.
Yeah.
Because if I hear great teammate, hard worker, and I'll deal with you being arrogant if I know you're going to work your butt off and you're talented. All right, cool. Let's work. Let's do this. Mm-hmm. I want that guy thinking I'm as good as anybody that Georgia has, because even if he's not, he's going to play like he is.
100%.
And I can deal with that. Like it was such an indictment of the Brian Kelly culture when I talked to a Notre Dame coach in 2019. It's a true story. And he said, I knew when they took the field against Georgia on that last drive that we weren't going to win. And I was like, really? Like, what? He goes, because I looked in the eyes of every player and nobody, they're just heads down. Nobody looked confident. Nobody was demanding the football. It just was like they didn't look confident. And you're not going to go 50 yards and put a touchdown in the end zone if you're playing Georgia, if you don't believe you're as very bit as good as them. The 2017 team had a completely different mindset. This team has a different mindset with some of the younger players. Some of the older players are in that entitled mode. Well, I know I didn't work hard and I was out most of the offseason, but I'm that guy. I should be getting the ball. Well, you're not playing like a guy that should be getting the ball a ton. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And that's the difference. And if you keep recruiting those guys year after year after year, then you can be in a situation where, okay, you're talented and you played last year, but you're not putting in the work this year. Cool. Go stand over there. Hey, younger player that's just as talented, but also, putting in the work. How about you get in there? And that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at.
I agree. It's about the talent that you bring in. I think the young guys on this team play with a level of confidence that starts to show on the field. And I think it's also a little bit of credit to the coaching staff, letting players play as their authentic selves. It's really hard to go out and play to the best of your abilities when somebody's telling you that an aspect of yourself needs to be suppressed.
Yeah.
So I'm really happy that seemingly so far, Marcus Freeman and company are allowing their players to go be themselves, and it shows on the field.
And the one thing I talked about, Trevor, is you still have to be a good teammate, right?
Yes.
And an example that was just brought into the chat is this from Gary L. He goes, thank goodness Junior T is the man he is. Even with being buried on the depth chart, he kept practicing hard and learning, and now he's doing it. And that is 100% correct. Do you know how many snaps that Junior Tuihalamaka took on defense against Texas A&M and Northern Illinois combined in those two games? Do you know the answer to that, Trevor?
4.
0. He did not get his first defensive snap this season until after Jordan Patel got hurt. Now, I know why you said 4 because I remember seeing him on the field. He was playing some special teams.
Gotcha.
But he did not play any defensive snaps. Not a one till Jordan Patel got hurt. And as soon as he stepped on the field against Purdue, what did he do? He's making plays. Very first start of the season against Miami, Ohio, he's making plays. You don't do that if you're not locked in when you're sitting your butt on the bench. And that's what you're talking about. I was like, do you think he was happy about it? Hey, coach, I just love whatever, man. Just whatever. No, coach, I'll do whatever you need me to do, but give me that shot. Yeah. And I'm going to go work. And you don't slack off for 3 weeks because you're in your feelings about not playing and then get thrust into it. And all of a sudden, bam, there you are. No, man, that's not how we're going to be if you want to win that way. And that's the difference between guys you can win with and guys you can't. And guys you can't win with, I don't care what you did last year. This is what I loved about Nick Saban. I don't care what you did last year. Last year doesn't have anything to do with where you are this year. This year, you earn everything you get this year based off what you're doing now.
Yeah.
And I think Notre Dame's getting close to the point where their roster's there. They're not completely there yet. There's some guys that are like, you gotta have to play them because you only have a lot of other guys. But most positions are getting to that point where you don't have to do that anymore, which is nice.
Patrick Earwood, going to my first Notre Dame game against Stanford. Anything I should do while being there? And will any of y'all be there? Any suggestions?
Well, Trevor gave one. If you're able to be there for the player walk, I think that's a pretty cool thing. Mm-hmm. Get over to the grotto. That's a really cool thing. And then on your way to the grotto, you can take a route that allows you to pass the library, then keep working up to the administration building, which is where the Golden Dome is, over past the Basilica, and then over to the grotto. So like if you take that route, it's a longer route, but allows you to see everything. It's pretty cool. It's a gorgeous campus. And then, work your way back down to the bookstore. I mean, that's honestly what I would do is now I know there's like a lot of things. I've always said this too, if you've never been to a Notre Dame game and this is your first game, try as best you can to get in Friday. Because there's also a lot of cool things going on Friday that you can do and experience. But honestly, it's just take it all in. Find out a couple of things like the trumpets under the dome, when the player walk is, and try to be at those things. Other than that, just get around and experience the campus because it is a absolutely gorgeous campus. It really is.
And as weird as it sounds, get there early, Patrick. Yeah. So one of my favorite things to do is get there early on the day, on game day. And it's just, I know it sounds super corny and cheesy. You just feel it. Notre Dame, South Bend in the fall. Leaves are starting to change. Like the weather's a little bit more crisp. I'd love it. I cannot wait to be up there this year. Yeah. Haven't yet. So excited to get up there. Jad Allen, 33. Marshall Pritchett. Where do you rate him, and will Notre Dame consider pursuit of him?
No, I mean, he's a tight end. I don't know. I mean, if they're looking for a second pass-catching tight end, I wouldn't be opposed to them going after Marshall Pritchett. I like Marshall Pritchett. I do. I think he's a good football player. I also understood why Notre Dame went with James Flanagan instead because James Flanagan's a lot better player. James Flanagan's a top 100 recruit for me. He's a flipping dude, and he is a guy that could play both sides of the ball, but I love him as a tight end. I mean, he is a dude at tight end. But and I just think Marshall Pritchett's a good football player that is kind of, Georgia Tech, North Carolina kind of guy that maybe if he can fill out could play at a place like Notre Dame. I would have had no problem with Notre Dame taking Marshall Pritchett. None at all. I also am not faulting them for not going after him once they got James Flanagan. But yeah, I mean, I've seen him live. He was at a camp and I said, this kid's a really good football player, but he was really good, but he wasn't like that top level from what I saw. You know what I mean? but could get there because he's got that's the thing is like, if it was close, I'd be okay taking the chance on him because he's got the genes. I mean, his dad was a Notre Dame caliber football player, freaking starter on their last national championship team. He was a really good Notre Dame caliber football player. But I just think Flanagan was better, honestly. And for a while there, they were only going to take one tight end. I think the only reason they're looking at two now is because of some injuries on the current roster and the fact that they have a little bit expanded look. And then they ran into a kid that's like a 10-7 or something crazy like that, and 10-5 or something like that in the 100-meter dash. So you kind of got to look at a guy like that.
Christopher Crosby, outside of offensive line, what is the most important thing each of you need to see in the passing game coming out of the bye?
I just need to see some adjust. There's three things for me, Trevor, and I'll talk about these in an article that I'm going to put out tomorrow. I need to see receivers playing with more urgency. I need to see a shift in how they're using the receivers, which you and I broke down the other day. Just move them around more. And he talked about the offensive line. The final thing for me is I think they need to reevaluate who's playing where and be more willing to kind of move some guys around at times. But I just think movement is a big thing. Adjusting their route concepts to kind of mix in some chase routes, some levels concepts along with their horizontal stretch stuff. What another thing would be is be willing to take more one-on-one go balls. Like that's a big thing. And I'm not a huge fan of just throwing a million go balls, but when teams are daring you to do it, take advantage of that from time to time and win. But, that's going to require them to play with more urgency. Part of playing with urgency is understanding the importance of winning off the line. Jaden Thomas showed great urgency on the 4th down route because he knew I've got to win. I have no choice but to win here. If I don't win, we're screwed. This is it. There's one route. It's me. I got to beat this guy. And he did. And if more Notre Dame receivers would do that, Trevor, I think they'd be in a good shot. What are some things that I know that some of those things we talked about already. Is there anything else that you've looked through the film to say, okay, this is definitely something that I want to see more of from them if the pass game is going to be effective?
Overall for me is just consistency with using motion, consistency with the degree of how you use urgency within your offense. I would like to see more consistency with being comfortable using diverse play calling, to your point. So mine gets drawn back to that. If I were to get a little bit more granular, it's to the things that you said. I want to see a little bit of diversity within route concepts. I want to see them take advantage of teams packing 7 or 8 guys into the box, because at the end of the day, if a defense is going to give it to you, I know that there's this mindset of take what the defense gives you. And I know a lot of that mindset is around, if the underneath is open, take the underneath. If the safe play is open, take the safe play. If the defense is giving you a one-on-one shot with 6'3" Bo Collins, who has proven he can go up and win in one-on-one situations, you take the shot. That's where I'm at.
Yeah. I want to respond to this because it's similar to the Bison hold we had the other day, Trevor, from Ghost X. It says, with the large amount of injuries, by the way, he has Macho Man Randy Savage's avatar, which I think is
That's awesome.
With the large amount of injuries being at home, would the admin consider installing a grass field? The NFLPA is in dialogue with the NFL about mandating this in soccer due to the recent data. Again, I don't have a comment on that, but I just want to point out that your perception is incorrect. Number one, Notre Dame has played 3 home games and 2 road games. Let me also remind you that Ashton Craig, Jordan Patelho, and also Billy Schrouth were all injured on a grass field on the road at Purdue. So I don't believe that it's been a large amount of the injuries are happening at home outside of the fact that they have played more games there. I mean, Josh Burnham got his ankle rolled up on, and Jordan Boubacar got hurt at home. But a lot of the other knee injuries that I can think of were injuries that happened in the road game at Purdue. I don't remember, did anyone have a season-ending injury or a bad injury against Northern Illinois? I think Josh Burnham's the only one I remember coming out of that game that I can think of. And then against Miami of Ohio, I don't remember any new big injuries coming out of that game that I can remember. And then this past game, you had Boubacar, and Jordan Faison got hurt at Texas A&M, grass field. That's the one injury I remember coming out of that. So you've actually had some pretty significant injuries on road grass fields. So again, I don't know about that data, and I know that there's conflicting reports. And as I said the other day, I'm not knowledgeable enough about that. But I think if we're going to say, like, you're allowing what you're hearing about that to then color your reaction to injuries, and you're remembering all the home ones on turf field, and then we're kind of just forgetting that Notre Dame had 3 devastating lower body injuries, including one that was a non-contact injury to Jordan Botelho on a grass field at Purdue. So, I just I don't know that I agree with that take based on. I'm not saying that it's anything other than grass. I'm just saying that is not an accurate assessment of Notre Dame's injuries. And I know at least a couple of the injuries that Notre Dame had in fall camp happened on their grass field. They spent a lot of time in fall camp on that grass field out beyond the 2 practice fields because they wanted to be on grass getting ready for A&M. And I know at least 2 injuries that they had that happened on grass. So I just would kind of have an issue with saying that that's an accurate portrayal of Notre Dame's injury problems this season.
Yeah, and I mean, to address the second part, the NFLPA has been in dialogue with the NFL about mandating grass fields for like the past 5 years. So it's not anything new. It's the data with soccer injuries versus football injuries is so skewed because the sport is played completely differently. You can't just look at it and say, well, they both play on grass. It's like, well, I mean, technically Wimbledon is on grass and it's tennis. So like, it's just the injury statistics get a little bit skewed. I don't think it has to do with the turf. I don't know what the science is behind it. So I can't speak on concrete if it is. I can just speak on soccer injuries are skewed because it's a completely different sport and played differently. So, but I'm with you, Brian.
I want to push back on this because there's some more lies being told in the chat. Joshua Finn said the grass field at Purdue is considered one of the best grass surfaces in America. And then Alex English said, apparently I haven't seen Brian's lawn. My lawn is absolutely not one of the best grass surfaces in America. Promise you that. We've had so many issues with our lawn, it's not even funny. So while I appreciate you, Irish English, I cannot allow falsehoods to be spoken in this show about my lawn. We must have honesty and integrity, and my yard is a hot mess right now. I'm trying to fix it, but it's a hot mess right now. I need to try to find someone that can mow and do yard work that's good at it, because I've already had to fire one guy this summer because he broke our brand new fence. Because listen to this. He said he texted me that I needed to come out and get the fence, and I didn't come out right away. So this idiot backs his tractor up against our fence and then uses our fence to hurl himself over the fence. And he broke the fence. I'm like, man, you're like, you don't know what yard you just randomly jumped into over our fence. You be careful, man. But and then the guy now is a nice kid, but just doesn't do a very good job. So if anyone has any lawn services in the Granger area, please hit me up because it needs a lot of work. But we had a weed growing in front of our air conditioner, and I said it earlier in the week. I was like, okay, I'll take care of that. It was like maybe this high. And I pulled into the house last night, and it was literally sticking out through the window of our backyard. I was like, this is ridiculous. So I get home, I got to put some gloves on and pull some, and it's like I take care of a couple of them. So yes, unfortunately, this is a falsehood, Irish English. My yard is definitely not one of the best grass surfaces in America. It's not even top 5 in my little group of 5 to 6 houses around me. So although our grass isn't dying, and there's a lot of people in our neighborhood whose grass is dying. So at least it's not dying, but it's a hot mess. It's a hot mess. But I appreciate you. I just want to make sure we're all being on the same page.
Joe Alt Delete. Do you think schools will push for taking away scholarships when players redshirt early in the season to hop in the portal?
I would be nervous about that. Part of me is like, look, if a kid's on pace to, like, no matter how, if I'm Marcus Freeman, if I'm the University of Notre Dame, if I'm anybody associated with it, no matter how let's say I felt Jaden Mickey, just hypothetically, was completely screwing over his teammates, completely hurting the team and all that type of stuff, making a horribly selfish decision. Let's say I felt that young man's still a semester away from graduating from the University of Notre Dame. I'm not taking that scholarship away because because him coming away with that, and then he's going to have to learn whatever lessons he's going to have to learn about the other thing he did. I'm not doing that. Now, if you're talking about a guy that's him leaving, he doesn't plan on graduating, would I want to have some conversations about that? Yeah, I'd probably, if I'm putting myself in the school shoes, I'd probably want to have some conversations about that. Like, that's cool. You can do this, but just so you know, if you don't live up to your commitment of being on this football team, then we don't have to honor our commitment paying your scholarship. I'd probably, because I think these NIL contract things need to become just contracts. I've said this before, Trevor, not with you. So, I mean, get your thoughts on it. I think a national letter of intent should have every promise in it. It's like any other contract, any other business deal you make. By the way, that reminds me, I need to send you your contract. But any other business deal you make, if you're trying to buy my business from me, we're going to have a lot of things built in there that you're doing this and I'm doing this. If you promise me the number 7, put it in the contract. If you promise me this, put in the contract. And I've said this, I want to go back to having red shirts. Players should have to sit out a year unless you as an institution violate terms of your agreement. You promised me I'd play 200 snaps as a freshman, and I didn't. Now, not because of injury but you promised me I'd be able to wear number 3. You promised me I'd live in this dorm. You promised me I'd do this. And it was in the contract, and you didn't live up to your contract. So now I get to get out of the contract at the end of the year. Like, I would like to see NLI's national letter of intent be more like that, where players have protections, but also schools have protections. If you choose on your own to no longer be part of this football program, we have the right to then revoke your tuition payment for the remainder of the semester.
Yeah, I think my only fear, and I agree with almost everything that you said, my only fear about the snap count issue goes back to, and I know you were just using it as an example of what could be in these contracts, but my only fear with something like that is the same with like what we talked about earlier, when high school recruits kind of fall off, they start to coast because they know it's like, oh, well, I mean, I just got, I just committed to Notre Dame, so I'm good now. I don't have to finish out my senior season and play to a high ability. I mean, if there is a contract that goes out and says you're going to play 200 snaps, I mean, what incentive does that player have to work to the highest degree, because he is already guaranteed 200 snaps throughout the course of the season? So that would be my only pushback on that, because I think that would start to get real fuzzy, because then there will have to be.
But then don't make the promise. That's
Sure.
my thing, right? Like, it's anything you promise to recruit during the recruiting process. If you can't guarantee him 200 snaps for whatever reason, including he doesn't work hard enough to earn them, then don't promise them.
Sure.
That's my thing, right? So, like, everything you said is true. Don't promise that in the contract. That's my thing, is you don't have to promise a kid snaps or a jersey number or where he's going to stay,
Right.
but don't promise him something that you then aren't going to be willing to deliver. That's my point. And whether you think it's a reasonable thing to promise or not, which in your point is very valid, then don't promise that. Don't promise that you can give him X number of snaps, because you can, at the end of the day, guarantee that, because you can't guarantee he's going to do the work to earn it.
Right.
And now, you see what I'm saying? So now he can get out of he didn't work hard and he can get out of his contract. But again, that's why you don't promise those things. And this is going to clear up a lot of the, well, gee, I went to this school thinking I was going to get that. Like, I went to college and I was told, hey, man, we want you to play quarterback. Everybody else is recruiting you at receiver. We want you to play quarterback. That lasted a week. Hey, why don't you go ahead and move out to receiver? And it got started as a true freshman there, but it's like that trust was gone. Now, I was the idiot that made a college decision based off that. Like, that was my fault. But, when you don't have that trust, then, but that's what I'm saying, is don't make promises you can't keep to these young people. So if you're not willing to put, then this is my thing, is if you have to put all these promises in a contract, then your conversation is going to look a whole lot different at the end of the day. Right? That's where I'm coming from, Trevor, on that, is if you can't promise that, and your point is spot on, then don't promise it. And then you don't have to worry about it being in the contract. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, no, and I hear you. I hear you 100%. I think what the NCAA needs to do overall is regulate the transfer portal, because it can't just be the saying of, oh, I can transfer multiple times a year. I know that there's times when like the transfer portal opens or closes. I think there needs to be some sort of penalization to, if you decide to opt out of a season, then something, whether it's written in a contract or whether it's just an NCAA rule and regulation. If you opt out of playing and you choose to take the red shirt, then all nil commitments are null and void. Scholarships, I think, is tough because like these kids are also students as well. And not all of them come from great families, great backgrounds who could financially support their kids going through school. So like scholarships get a little hairy, but I agree.
And don't quit on your team.
Sure.
See through what you committed to. Like, here's my thing. If you decide before the season starts, hey, I'm not playing to this, I'm not doing that, I'm out. That's fine. Then all those reps can go to the kid that's going to see it through the season. That's the whole point. Is there has to be some level of consequence to choices that you make as a young person. And all these kids are old enough to go fight in a war if we needed to. They should be mature enough to say, hey, listen, you make a commitment to a team. The day fall camp starts, your top priority is the team. Prior to that, you do whatever's best for you. I've always said this. Outside of the season, you always do what's best for you. Coaches do that. Players do that. Administrators do that. But once the season starts, you're committed to that team, barring one exception. In your contract, you were promised this. They didn't live up to that agreement. So fine, I'm taking my red shirt. You're going to pay for my tuition because that's how the contract is stated. You see what I'm saying? So I understand the point you're making, Trevor. And you're right. You don't know but that's why you see it through. When you make a commitment, you see it through. And if you choose to not do that, then understand you're not going to finish this semester out here. But that's a choice you're making.
Sure.
And you know that before you make that decision. It's not like you would it be a rule and none of the players would know about it. You would know that's the rule. And then the other thing too is coaches can say, hey, listen, it's okay. We understand. Because sometimes coaches are going to be the ones making those decisions.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And that's kind of where I'm at. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
Right? So like everything you're saying is spot on, Trevor. Like all those things are all valid and true. It's just that as long as I'm a big fan of it, as long as everybody knows what the rules are and what the agreements are and what we've agreed to, then I have no sympathy for people who have to suffer consequences because they chose not to honor their end of the contract. Right?
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm at on that one. So good conversation. I think it's one of the few times we've disagreed so far. I dig that. I like that.
Single digit dreams. How would you guys rate the tackling so far this year? Seems suspect at times.
Look, every team in America is going to have missed tackles. I mean, It's just football. I actually think Notre Dame's tackling so far this season has been better, and it's gotten better. And we talked about this, Trevor, after the first game of the year. Look, everybody in college football is having some missed tackles early in the season because you just can't prepare the way that you used to prepare anymore. It's just football's different now, man. It just is. But I think overall, their tackling has been pretty good. So, for example, if you look at compared to Ohio State's defense, which is playing pretty lights out right now, Ohio State has 34 missed tackles on the season in 4 games. You look at Notre Dame, and they've got 38 missed tackles in 5 games.
Yeah.
So that's fewer per game.
Against high-level opponents.
Yeah, now there has been much tougher competition that can make you miss more. To your point, that's a great point. You know, Alabama has 31 missed tackles in 4 games. If I did the math correctly, if you took that times 31 times 4 games, I'm going to think that's going to put them over 38. 31 divided by 4 times 5, that would put them at 39 missed tackles. So I think the tackling is actually pretty good. What I would say is there's been a couple missed tackles. Georgia, by the way, has 42 missed tackles in 4 games. I would argue that some of the missed tackles have been like key situations. Xavier missing a tackle, but overall, I think the tackling, there's a couple, the last couple weeks, Jaden Osbury has made about 3 or 4 off the top of my head, just open field tackles. And I think you talked about this with the defense overall, and your breakdown of the defense, Trevor, was in the post-game show, I think it was, where you were talking about how, like, I actually thought there was a couple plays where they made some really strong open field tackles in this game.
Yeah.
And if they don't, how's that go? So I actually think the tackling has really improved this season compared to last year. and where this defense was last year, Trevor.
The only areas that they needed to improve on, to be honest with you, was what Brian and I talked about yesterday when we were going over the defense, where they were at the bye week. And they kind of fixed a good amount of those problems. Against Texas A&M and Northern Illinois, contact was made around 2-3 yards past the line of scrimmage, and then they would get an extra push, talking about opposing ball carriers against Notre Dame's defense. But that's been cleaned up for the most part. There's been some instances, but it hasn't been as consistent. But I think one-on-one open field tackling for Notre Dame this year has been significantly better than I thought it was. Jordan Clark is a better open field tackler than I thought that he was going to be. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, tackling I think has been pretty decent.
And I am looking at some of the missed tackle numbers, and some of those missed tackles are from guys that weren't starters. So, but I think overall, like you said, I think the tackling has been better.
Yeah.
And some of the instances were like Jalen Sneed missed a tackle against A&M, but Kingston was right there to clean it up for a loss. So there's been some of that too, where some of the quote unquote missed tackles, guy makes you miss and he's still going down for a no gain because you're swarming pretty well. Now I still want to see the -2 happen, not the 0, but that's been improved as well.
Archer 452, what is your take on the college football Super League proposal that came out this week? Would Notre Dame's proposed conference of Boston College, Maryland, Navy, Virginia, and Virginia Tech be exciting for you?
No. So I have not really paid attention to this, to be completely honest with you. I think from what I've heard about it, it seems kind of stupid. Just my opinion. So I'm reading it. It's the Power 12 conference would be comprised of 72 schools drawn from the current Power 5. The Power 12 conference will be split into 12 divisions, which is what, 6 per team, right? And I just think the whole thing is kind of stupid. So, it's something about they take the quote unquote 12 big programs and they're all in a different thing. And I think that'd be stupid. And for Notre Dame specifically, that does nothing for me.
No, I also think it's weird that they put Notre Dame in the East and not the Great Lakes.
Right. You're putting them with some traditional, ACC Big East teams, but why would they not be with Purdue, Indiana? Yeah, just the whole thing seems kind of dumb to me, to be completely honest with you, because I'm looking at, yeah. So, I mean, again, that's just an initial take on it. I have not studied it. I have not studied what the non-conference would look like, how that would go. We're wasting time on things that are silly. And I'm not talking about us. I'm talking about some of the, it's like, why are we talking about this?
Sure.
That's just ridiculous. Here's a thought. If you're going to go back to the just a football only thing and a Power 72, and you're going to mix up the conferences to where there's because I would assume that this would generate some sort of equal rev share of TV money. I would assume, since it's not an SEC anymore, it's not the Big Ten anymore, it would be some sort of equal. Okay, so if you're going to do that, this is not freaking rocket science. If you're going to take the Power 5 schools with a couple additions, and you're going to create a league in which there is a rev share and everybody gets the same TV money, go back to the old conferences. Bring back the Southwest Conference, the Big 8, the Pac-8, the ACC, the Big East, the Big 10 that actually has, crazy thought, 10 teams in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the independents, the team. I think Penn State would ultimately rather be an independent. They can't. I think if there was a way where everyone's back to where it was, before, you can choose to still be in this league if you want, but it doesn't matter anymore because it's the same revenue. If you want to be independent, you can be independent. All right. I think you'd see more teams opt for that. Because if you're like, well, yeah, but if you can't get that automatic bid in the Big Ten, well, Penn State has been in the Big Ten how long? How many times have they won that league? Once, twice in 30-some years, right? They had the undefeated team in the 90s, right? And then they had the Rose Bowl team and the team that played in the playoff in 16. And then they had the Rose Bowl team and what was it? No, that was 16, the year that they won the Big Ten. That's when they played USC in the Rose Bowl. They had one other Rose Bowl team. So they've won 3 Big Ten championships since they joined in the 90s. You're not getting the automatic bid anyway.
Right.
Go back to go to the Big East or something. I mean, like that's what I say. Is go back to the old conferences because now you're saving money on travel because you're not in these stupid conference affiliations. You're bringing back some of the old tradition, which is going to do what? Reignite the fan base, get more people in seats, things along those lines. It's really not that hard. It's really not that hard to do this the right way. They make this stuff so much more complicated than it needs to be. If you can create an equal revenue stream for TV money, boom, right there. And then go back to the old leagues to where the Big Ten can't and the SEC can no longer throw their weight around to get this or that because it doesn't matter. It's an equal rev share. If you care about the game, then bring that back. Now, ESPN can still negotiate that we want the SEC and we'll pay more for the SEC, but it's still going into the same equal pool. So you're still creating that competition. Fox still has to compete for which leagues they're going to air.
Yeah.
CBS still has to compete for which leagues they're going to air. Totally fine. You're paying this college football universe X amount of dollars to get the SEC, but that money's being distributed evenly to everybody. That would go a long way to fixing this whole thing. And then you could go back to, or even if you didn't want to go to the old conferences, create new ones that actually make some level of geographic sense. So there you go. There you go. Create it that way. And somebody said, would you share money with a lesser indie? That's the stupidest thing I've seen. Are they on my show? Are we playing against them? Are they coming onto my show and talking? And no, we're in a different league. That's nonsense. You could come up with a better example, but they're all part of the same entity. We are not part of the same entity. That's ridiculous. Ridiculous. There's things you can come up with to push back against what I'm saying. That's a bad one. That's not a good one. Come on. So that's what I think. You want to get the game back to being about the game. And yes, everybody's making money, everybody's getting paid and all those type of things. Sure. That's fine. Players deserve their cut. Fine. ESPN can still say, but we don't want Big 12 games. We want SEC games. Fine. But that money's still going throughout whatever the 72 league team would be. That would make the most sense to me. As opposed to some random, let's just randomly put 6 teams together that, like you said, don't make any sense. Like, why is Notre Dame playing against teams in Massachusetts, in Virginia, and Maryland? What does that mean? You know what I mean? So that's basically how it is. And so Insured by Big asked a fair question. If there are different conferences, but ESPN pays more for one conference, then why would they equally share the money? Because that would be the system that you'd have in place. Because listen, if you want to have it this way, I mean, NFL's that way, right? Like, so the NFL says, hey, we're competing for the AFC. We're competing for the NFC. That money still gets distributed differently, right? I mean, so it's all still college football.
Yeah.
It's all part of the same league. It's about bringing it under one umbrella as opposed to, like, the AFC doesn't get to go to negotiate their own contract for the AFC. It's the deals are all being negotiated with the NFL. Okay, we're going to have an AFC package and an NFC package. You're going to host these. You're going to that's how I don't know if it's still like that, but that's how it used to be. Where like CBS had for a long time, like Fox had the NFC, and then I think it was like NBC had the AFC, that type of thing. But it's still being negotiated at the top by the NFL. And there were times when the NFC got a bigger deal because that network wanted them because there was better teams or whatever. It's still being split up between those teams, right? So this would simply be a similar situation where you're going to pay money to have these 72 teams, leagues of these 72 teams broadcast. You do it that way, because if you don't do it that way, you get exactly what we get now, which is a bunch of crap. Because 2 leagues that happen to have the biggest fan bases can tell everybody else what to do, and they're not taking anything into account about what's better for. They don't care about the Big 12. They don't care about they don't even really care about their own teams. Because if they cared about their own teams, then why would we? bring USC into the equation and UCLA in the equation and make our lacrosse team and our volleyball team and our basketball team have to travel out there, because you don't care about your student athletes. You care about how much money can we make. So you're not doing things that are good for the game or good for young people. And when it's all about we're going to do what's best for us, then it creates a worse product, in my opinion. At the end of the day, people used to say, well, Major League Baseball is always going to be the big time. It's American. Major League Baseball can't touch the NFL right now. I don't know that they can even touch college football right now. Why? Big part of it is because they made decisions based on greed that turned off a big chunk of their fan base. I don't know if they're getting it back now or not, but that's what happened. And every league is susceptible to that. And that's going to happen to college football someday if they continue to go down this road. You're already seeing it. You're already starting to see it.
Yeah, the biggest thing that I don't like with the conference realignment is that it's all focused on football. It's theoretically, I don't think it's an issue for college football teams to travel anywhere in the country because they have to do it one time a week. But the thing that I don't like about it is what it has to do with the other sports. Because I think people, yes, it's easy to bring up the sports that not a lot of people follow, but like college basketball is massive. March Madness is massive. College basketball potentially could travel 3 times a week.
Yeah. So
I think it's not as much consideration to the school as a whole, which I think is frustrating. So yeah, that's where it doesn't sit well with me.
I love this attempt to try to spin this. Insured by Big, who's an SEC fan, says not true. Somebody said something about the SEC. Not true. SEC has maintained teams that are in the South. What does the E stand for in SEC? Trevor, do you know what that stands for?
I think it's East.
Southeastern Conference. So are we now saying, well, technically Oklahoma and Texas are southeastern of Alaska. So that's technically southeast. It's southeast of Russia. Right? Like, bro, it's literally, they were used to be in a conference called the Southwest Conference. Do you say, I'm traveling to Southeast this weekend? Oh, yeah, where are you going? Dallas. You may not be good at geography, but that's not the southeastern part of the United States. That's the southwest part of it. So no, don't try and look. The SEC went out and got some teams that are not in SEC country. Can we at least be honest about that? You can say, hey, here's why, and blah, but they're not. Okay, they're not. So yeah. And somebody said, do the ACC next. I've already said how stupid all that is. You have schools that literally border on the Pacific Ocean that are in the Atlantic Coast Conference. It's all stupid. The Big Ten has, 18 teams? It's stupid. It's just dumb. And when you do this realignment, please don't name your conference after a number or a region, because you're not going to honor that. It's just dumb. There's nothing southeast about Texas. There's a southeastern part of Texas, but there's also a southeastern part of Hawaii. It doesn't mean they should be in the SEC. You know what I'm saying? So, nah, man. Just league number 1 to league number 2. I mean, that's just how dumb this whole thing is, Trevor. It's so ridiculous. It's so dumb. And that's why I was respected to Pac-12, because they'd always change the name of their league to fit the number of teams that were in the league. It was Pac-8, Pac-10, Pac-12, and there you go. And, the Big 12 has 10 teams. The Big 10 has 14. It's just so stupid. And then you wonder why kids are not as educated as used to be, because they can't even count numbers and look at maps anymore. Like, well, hold on a second. How's that southeast? Texas, I thought, come on. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Poor kids. They have no chance, Trevor. No chance. All right. Oh, goodness gracious.
Josh Bufo, the motivational business banker. Would you guys be in favor of a midseason captaincy award for the most deserving player if Marcus Freeman implemented this tradition? If yes, my vote would be Drake Bowen. You guys are awesome.
I'm not a Trevor. I'm curious. I'll let you answer this one first. What are your thoughts on this? Because I have a kind of a strong stance on this, but I want to hear your thoughts first.
A mid-season captain award. I'm going to err on the side of no, just because I think if you're elected captain at the start of the season, the expectation is that you should be leading throughout the entire year. That's my whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have to go through and elect somebody else as a captain because either the other captains weren't doing that good of a job, or because this person should have been elected a captain and they weren't, I think that's a miss somewhere. Josh, I understand where you're coming from with this one. I would agree Drake Bowen could be in contention for that, but I don't know. I think that gets a little. I think that gets a little muddy. What do you think, Brian?
I'm with you. I'm not, I would say that I would consider maybe taking a captaincy away from a player, not currently on the team. I don't know that any of the Notre Dame players have, just because you're not playing well doesn't mean you lose your captaincy, right? Like, I'm not saying, but like if a kid was like, had a bad attitude and wasn't leading and wasn't conducting himself like a captain, I'd be okay removing it at some point in time.
Sure.
But I kind of feel like when you start doing some of those type of things, you're doing things that are separators, not things that are bringing you together. And I've also said that I want to see a guy earn his captaincy over the course of a season, a year, and off season. And yeah, Drake's doing some really good things, but I don't need Drake worrying about being a captain. Being a captain isn't just putting a C on your chest. There's responsibility that comes with being a captain.
Yeah.
There's a leadership on and off the field that comes with being a captain. I want Drake Bowen worrying about what his job is now. I don't really care about that. And we've said before, you can be the leader in your room and not be a captain. Leadership is not, and Al Golden nailed it when he said it. We got a lot of leaders on this defense, and not all of them are captains. And that's a good thing. And that would explain why the defense is playing the way it is and the offense isn't, because I don't know that the offense has a lot of leadership. What was one of the questions we had? You had one guy named a captain off your defense, and it was on your offense, and he was a guy that has only been in your school since January.
Yeah.
It's a problem.
Yeah.
It's a problem. You literally landed two former captains on your defense, and neither one of them were named captains, and Jordan Clark and Rod Hurd. Why? Because you already had captains on your roster. Part of that's youth, but I just, for me, I would say I get what you're trying to do. I like the notion of it, but I don't know that it would be something I would play. I don't want to play around with the captain thing. Once you've earned it, you're the captain. You're the captain through the whole season. And Drake Bowen is emerging as a leader. If he is, it would be, okay, then I expect you to be that guy in the room, and we can address the captain thing next year. But captains have already been decided. The only thing I would ever do is maybe remove some captains. I wouldn't necessarily add to them at that point in time. The other thing you could do is, if you had like a smaller number of captains, Trevor, is you could have a guy that like each week is kind of the honorary captain because of what he did or something during the week, that goes out for the coin toss. I mean, but with Notre Dame having 6 captains, that's not even really something that they can do. So
as long as I don't do what Colorado did, I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Leaders and dogs.
I love this question. Joshua Finn talking about our conference. He goes, and people keep demanding that we join all that mess. Amen, dude. A flipping men on that one.
Tom Connor.
Sorry, that's one from earlier.
Oh,
all
right. Coach Koch. How does Notre Dame address the ongoing quarterback issue? It seems to me that it's not about who the quarterback is. It's the coaching that's the problem. They all seem to regress the longer they are here.
And that's not really something you can address right now. I don't know that that's something that I can even say needs to be addressed now, because do we really know if that's the answer? That's true over the course of 20 years, but it's kind of like most of what you're referring to, Coach, and this is a great observation from you, Coach. Yeah. It really is. It's like you're spot on with that. But how much of that is because of the current group of coaches? You have an offensive coordinator in his first year. You could argue the best stretch of quarterback play at Notre Dame was when he was here, in my opinion, when you look at what Everett did and then Malik and Deshaun. But I don't know that you can really say that this staff should be evaluated and judged based on what we know to be true and feel about what happened before they got here. And I don't know that we can say that this is true of Gino Guidugli quarterbacks. What we could say that would be fair is Gino Guidugli doesn't do a good job of working with transfer quarterbacks and getting the most out of new guys. That could be a fair critique because Sam Hartman regressed, Riley Leonard regressed from where they were before. Okay, that's fair. But I don't know that we can necessarily, Coach, go with the old criticism of the Kelly era to reflect this staff, because this staff is still pretty new and hasn't gone through a cycle. I mean, the two quarterbacks that were recruited by this staff are a freshman and a redshirt freshman. I think it's too early to say if they've regressed. And Kenny Minchie hasn't regressed. Kenny Minchie is a better player today than he was a year ago. So maybe it's like, hey, Gino just stinks at coaching transfers, but give him a kid that he can work with from day one, like he did Desmond Ridder, and it's a little better. Maybe that's it. I don't know, but I just find a good coach that can develop quarterbacks and build your system to what you want it to be, and then recruit kids that fit that system. That's honestly how you fix it.
Yeah, I think it's tough to gauge because the majority of the starting quarterbacks Notre Dame has had since 2021 have been one and dones. They've been transfers. And I think one thing that a lot of people don't understand about getting a transfer portal quarterback is there are times not only do you have to teach them your system, there might be old bad habits that they have that you have to then break and deconstruct a little bit of part of their game before you can implement them into your offense. So I'm going to hold on this one. I'm going to hold and share my expectations for what's going to happen until a starting quarterback at Notre Dame is somebody that's been a part of the system for a while and has been groomed under the current coaching staff. Coach, I hear your frustrations 100% because looking at a guy like Sam Hartman and looking at a guy like Riley Leonard, there has been clear regression, but it's tough. It's tough to gauge right now.
We have a couple super chats, Trevor, so we'll get to some of those.
Sounds good. Super chat from Tyler Evans. Thank you, Tyler. How does Kalen DeBoer win so fast everywhere he goes? What do you think it is?
Dude's a freaking genius. I mean, first of all, he's made smart decisions on where to go. I mean, he walked into a Washington team that was struggling, but also had a decent infrastructure of talent, then added some players to it. But he's he's just a smart football coach, man. He's a genius football coach. He understands how to call a game. He understands how to build a team. He understands how to build a culture of guys that buy into what they're trying to accomplish. Yeah. He understands the importance of great scheme, but also knowing how to execute that scheme in a high technical manner. And whatever he believes in, he recruits the heck to that ability of what they try to do. And he did it at Sioux Falls. He did it as a coordinator. He did it at Fresno. He did it at Washington. He's doing it at Alabama. I mean, some guys are just honestly geniuses. And what it means to be a genius head coach is it comes down to, and obviously scheme is important, Trevor, but it comes down to identifying talent on the coaching staff, identifying talent at a player level, having consistency in who you are, consistency in your approach, understanding how to get the best out of young people and being able to properly motivate players to play their role, I think he lost his first game against a ranked opponent at Washington. The first game against a ranked foe they lost. He hasn't lost one since, except the title game to Michigan. It's like, that's a guy that knows how to get it. It's like, what made Lou Holtz so great? I mean, Lou Holtz he had more bad losses than he had great losses in his career. Meaning he'd lose to like a 5-6 Stanford team and then win 5 games against top 10 teams that year. It's like his record against top 10 teams was insane at Notre Dame. Yeah. Urban Meyer's the same way. It's like dominated Michigan, but then gets blown out by Purdue and Iowa. Never lost to Michigan. You know what I mean? But like some guys are just that way. They know the game. They know how to motivate. They know people. They know how to evaluate people. They know how they believe in teaching the game the right way. There's got to be a level of consistency to your approach and the technical demands that you ask out of players every day to be able to have the consistency that he has. I just think it's an all-around level of genius. And he's made smart decisions on what schools to go to. He's not walking into complete rebuilds. you talk about Washington and I brought in Michael Penix and this, but he inherited Roma Dunze. He inherited Jalen. I'm drawing a complete blank. Jalen, goodness gracious. The other, oh man, I can't believe Notre Dame even recruited the kid. And I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. The other receiver, Jalen McMillan. He inherited him. Now they got Jalen Polk was a transfer. Dylan Johnson was a transfer. There's a lot of guys on that football team that were guys he inherited. So he made a smart decision about what jobs take over. So that's kind of where I'm at on that.
I agree. I don't have much more to add.
Andy Milton fan, thank you for your super chat. I know that was discussed in the show or in the chat, so you guys had some fun with that. Let's move on to this super chat from AST12321.
Thank you for the super chat. Do you believe there is an above 20% chance that Steve Angeli will win a fair quarterback competition next year? Do you think he will stay if he doesn't?
No, I don't think there's a 20% chance he wins that. No, I don't. I think if he wins the quarterback job next year, it will be because it's rigged in his favor. I don't. I like Steve. I'm not going to change my opinion. I don't see anything that some of you see in him as a quarterback. I don't think he reads. Somebody said he doesn't like him because he doesn't do complex. He doesn't do basic reads. I mean, or all he can do is basic reads. Like one guy. I don't see what you guys see. That's just where I'm at on this one. So I don't see that there's any chance that he is competitive in a fair quarterback battle. He's the least athletic of the three, and he's not a bad athlete, right? He's not like some stiff back there. He's the least athletic of the three. He's the slowest processor, and as I've said before, he also has the longest throwing motion, which is a really bad combination. And then also, he has the lowest ceiling. I don't even think you could argue he has the highest floor, to be honest with you. So I just don't see any scenario where there's more than a 5 to 10% chance he wins a starting job next year outside of injuries. I don't see it. Will he stay if he doesn't? I don't know. I hope all these kids stay. I don't want any of these kids to leave. And I would hope that if Steve Angeli goes into next spring in a battle for the quarterback job, that he'll understand, this didn't play out how I wanted it to, but I'm a semester or something away from getting my degree from Notre Dame, and that would be pretty awesome. So this is nothing against Steve. Like there's somebody I banned earlier. It's like your inability to have a grown-up conversation never ceases to amaze me because it has nothing to do with hating Steve Angeli. So I'm supposed to tell you lies about what I see so that you don't think I hate a kid. If you think, like, to anyone that thinks Steve Angeli is a really good quarterback, I hope you're right. I hope I'm wrong. But it's honesty. I think he's a great kid. I just don't think he's a very good quarterback. It has nothing to do with hate. It has to do with evaluations. Could I be wrong? Sure, I could be wrong. Trevor, you could be wrong on Steve because I know we have a similar opinion. It has nothing to do with hate. I just don't think he's a very talented quarterback. I don't. I think he does basic things well. I mean, I think the fact that some people get excited about some of the couple decent throws he made say more about just how bad the pass offense has been in the last couple of years. But like somebody's like, oh, in the bowl game, we looked like we had real receivers. And I'm like, did you not watch the Wake game, the Pitt game, the NC State game, the Central Michigan game where they had 2 75-yard touchdowns? Like, let's not act like that was the first game all year we saw a decent pass attack, but it's the backup quarterback syndrome, in my opinion. So I just don't think he has any chance to be in a legit, to win the starting quarterback job next year if it's a fair competition. Because if it's not fair, it would benefit him. Because it would be like, let's go with the veteran, and we're going to steer it towards the veteran. If it's a truly open competition, I don't think there's any chance in heck that he wins that job.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of disagreement on this one with me here, Brian. I mean, look, you've said it in multiple shows. If Steve Angeli was truly the guy, Notre Dame wouldn't have went to the portal, number one. Number two, the thing, and what has everybody said in the chat today from the shows that I've done so far, is the thing that has plagued Notre Dame over the last 20 or so years, outside of a handful of outliers, has been mediocre quarterback play. And there's nothing that Steve Angeli has done to show me that he would break that mold. Again, that doesn't mean that I think that he's bad. So above a 20% chance. I mean, the fair quarterback competition is kind of throwing me off a little bit because, Brian, to your point, if it would be unfair, it would be to the guy who has been a part of the program since 2022, and they would biasly make him the quarterback. So, and do I think he will stay if he doesn't? I honestly think that depends on who wins the starting job. The scenario that I could see in my head would be if Kenny wins the job, I think Steve leaves to go and be a starting quarterback somewhere. Because, I mean, the kid at the end of the day still wants to play football. I get that. I know he didn't come to Notre Dame to be a lifelong backup. And I think CJ Carr stays as well because he's the younger guy, and that's just kind of how things play out. But I think if CJ wins, I could see a scenario where Kenny would, you know, look on, and I could see a scenario where Steve stays and be a backup to somebody who's a redshirt freshman. So there's
I don't want us to get too into predicting who will or won't transfer because we don't know.
Sure.
But outside of this, the odds of all the kids on the roster, we said it earlier, the odds of signing 4 kids in a stretch 4 years in a row, the odds of all of them staying is not great.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So yeah, that's where I'm at. So, yep. Thanks for the super chat. I appreciate that. Let's get to a couple more here before we run. I want to just find a couple others that got to that one already. Here's one that I wanted to get to.
Trevor Rocket asked, Brian and Trevor, who of the non-starting offensive linemen would you like to see split reps with the starters? Gerby Lambert and Sullivan Absher are so intriguing with that size.
I mean, Trevor, you kind of answered your own question. I mean, for me, that's my 2. It's Absher and Lambert.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that there's the potential that if you're like, look, the problem is Sullivan Absher's best position is left guard. Okay. Then rotate him and Sam Pendleton. I think that would take a lot of pressure off Sam, to be honest with you. And you know, maybe Sullivan can go to right guard and maybe rotate every third series with Rocco or something like that, you know, and who knows, but I just think both of those kids deserve a lot of reps this week. I don't know if they got them or not, but I think they both deserve them. Absolutely.
Agreed.
I don't know that there's anyone else that I would have said. I might have said Sam Pendleton if he didn't win the starting job, but yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. With all the injuries, that list got a lot smaller.
Yeah.
And those 2 guys are just really high upside guys, especially Gerby. It's a pretty simple one.
Terrence Westbrook. So, do you think Notre Dame wins the rest of their games this season?
Regular season? Yeah. If I had to answer now, I'd say yes. Yes. I think Notre Dame had 1 bad game this year out of 5, and they played really bad. And as long as they can avoid playing like that again, I don't know that anyone on the schedule can beat them. I certainly feel good about them winning the next 9. Or excuse me, not the next 9, the next 6. And then, you know, let's see who USC is by that point in time. That's the only one that I look at and say that's going to be a tough one. That's going to be a battle. But it's certainly the next 6. If they just even if they just play like they did against Miami of Ohio, I still think they beat the next 6 teams on their schedule. I think they beat Stanford, Georgia Tech, Army, Navy, Virginia, and Florida State. If they just play like they did against Miami of Ohio, which I'd say is probably their second worst performance of the season. Would you agree with that? If I'm ranking their performance as best to last, I'd go Purdue, Louisville, A&M, Miami, way down here, Northern Illinois.
Yeah.
You know, that would be my ranking of the 5. Even if they played every game the rest of the way like they did against Miami of Ohio, I still think they're undefeated until they head out to LA.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I think they do. We're starting to come up on the time where is Notre Dame defined by the 4 wins or 1 loss? You know, what is this team more like? And I'm starting to err on the side of they're the team that has 2 top 25 wins and are 4-1, and that's where I'm at with that one. So yeah, Terrence, I do think that they win the rest of their regular season games.
All right, Trevor, let's get to one more. Here's a comment from JP Buellsfeld. He says Notre Dame is trying to remove the 2025 away Miami game, move it to 26, and Notre Dame is trying to schedule someone else at home or away in 2025, not on the schedule currently. I don't know the answer to that, JP. I know you've answered that before. I'm not sure. I'd have to look into that. I will probably, try to make maybe a couple calls, but I'm not sure about that being the case. So I wish I could answer that, but I don't know the answer to that. And then, I think the rest are kind of things that we've kind of dove into in some way. So that's going to do it for now. We do got to get running here, folks. But thank you all for being with us today. That was a pretty good show, Trevor. That was a lot of fun, man. Got a couple rants in there, a lot of great questions. So hopefully, you guys enjoyed that show quite a bit. So I appreciate you all very much. For Trevor, I'm Brian. Guys, thank you so much for being with us today and being with us all week. We had really good numbers this week for an off week. So I really appreciate you all for being with us today and enjoying the back and forth. That was a lot of fun. What do they got to do, Trevor? Got to hit that like button, right? Okay.
Sure do.
Got to hit that notification bell, right?
Mm-hmm.
Got to make sure you all subscribe to the channel. Got to make sure that you share this podcast with your friends. Not just somebody said, what can I do to help Irish Breakdown? Okay. Number one, listen to all of our podcasts. Also watch our YouTube channel. You can subscribe to whatever your podcast platform at Irish Breakdown. Those are two great options. And then, of course, the best way to support us is to support us on the Champions Lounge at boards.irishbreakdown.com. The number one way to support Irish Breakdown, because we get all the revenue from that. So if you're someone who says, hey, I want to support you guys, I don't know how to do it, that's the number one way to do it, plus listening to our podcast and then the YouTube channel as well. So those are all great ways to support us. And it helps us to continue to thrive and continue to show up every day and put out great shows. So we appreciate you all very, very much. So make sure you check that out at boards.irishbreakdown.com. For Trevor, I'm Brian. Have an awesome rest of your day. Enjoy football tonight and, of course, all the football tomorrow. And we'll see you guys again on Monday. Thanks for joining us on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.